Considering it's 7:01, I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Chelmsford Board of Selectmen for December 3rd, 2018. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, just as a way of note, this meeting is being broadcast by Chelmsford Telemedia and recorded for future broadcasts. We have members of the press here tonight, Lowell Sun and the Chelmsford Independent. Anyone else? No? All right, thank you. We have one public service announcement. Would you like to read that about citizens' petitions? Ken?
Yep. Town of Chelmsford Public Notice, Spring 2019 Annual Town Meeting. The Town of Chelmsford will convene the 2019 Spring Town Meeting on Monday, April 29, 2019. Articles to be included on the warrant must be submitted in duplicate to the office of the Town Manager at 50 Billerica Road prior to 4 p.m. on Monday, January 7, 2019. Any articles submitted after that time will not be considered by the Selectmen for inclusion on the warrant. Petition articles submitted by private citizens must carry the signatures of at least 10 or more certified voters of the Town of Chelmsford. For more information, please feel free to contact the Town Manager's office at 978-250-5201.
Thank you. As we usually begin with open session, anyone who has anything to say about anything related to the town, they're welcome to come up to the mic. Except if you're going to talk about classification, in which case you can come up when we get to that part of the meeting. Would anyone like to speak on anything tonight?
Isn't that why we're here?
Not here.
Good afternoon. My name is Adam Brando. I live at 6 Housatonic Ave. Just before the Thanksgiving holiday, I emailed most, or if not all of you, concerning some overlapping regulations and zoning bylaws and Board of Health jurisdiction. Excuse me. Mostly considered to the keeping of small animals. And I know as soon as I say chickens, everybody's going to roll their eyes because it's a hot topic in town right now. But the topic is very real, and I feel very passionate that Chelmsford residents should have the right to keep chickens in their backyard. So I'm doing whatever I can to make this happen. Right now, there are some zoning bylaws that have been discovered that overlap with some Board of Health chicken permits that have been issued. So there is a handful, a dozen plus chicken owners in town who at the end of 2018 will no longer have their permits renewed. So if you can imagine any of your pets at home, dogs, cats, whatever they may be, at December 31st getting an eviction notice for those pets. So I believe the process that is most straightforward for correcting this oversight or this issue of requiring 40,000 square feet to own an animal as an accessory to a building has already been attempted to be updated. If you're familiar with Article 17 that was withdrawn from the Fall Town meeting, that was supposed to, or intended in my opinion, to distinguish between small animals requiring a smaller lot size and larger animals requiring the full 40,000 square feet. So we have both an immediate concern of mine is animals that have been properly permitted throughout the town are being evicted as of the end of this year because of this conflict between zoning bylaws and Board of Health regulations. Now, in my hand here, I have the Board of Health regulations that are in draft format. However, they are 10 pages of regulations that primarily are drafted to talk about poultry, but it includes smaller other animals at this time. So these actually just came from the Board of Health meeting. I had got an opportunity to speak before I could come here. But they are up for discussion at the moment. I believe that they need a fair amount of changes before they are what I would consider reasonable. But my primary concern to the Board of Selectmen here is this zoning bylaw that is really jamming the Board of Health up from properly permitting animals in town. So I don't know if I was expecting any feedback, but I really wanted to be heard today. That this is something that I do plan on submitting to this fall town or spring town meeting petition deadline. So just as a heads up, we would like to propose the complete removal of the zoning bylaw that restricts animals as an accessory to a building to a 40,000 square foot property, so that the Board of Health can properly evaluate what is a healthy environment for animals that are an accessory to a building. Yes.
Actually, a question.
Yes.
You said you were at the meeting,
Yes.
and I was at the meeting earlier. Had the discussion stopped when you came here, or was the discussion still going on?
The discussion was still going on. I had an opportunity to speak, but I really would like to come to this meeting as well, so I had to leave.
All right, and the town should know that that proceeding is being televised,
Yes.
It's videotaped.
rebroadcast,
Yeah, it's being
on
videotaped.
demand
Yeah.
by Chelmsford Telemedia, so the message will get out. You know, I think it's been said here before that the Board of Health and the Planning Board really are in control of all the issues that you talked about, and that, you know, the board hopes that there is an amiable solution for everyone. We understand that, you know, to some people, chickens are just chickens, and to other people, they are pets. And, you know, we are sorry that, at least I am, that your owners are caught in this conundrum, and hope that there is a reasonable solution for everyone.
I appreciate your kind words. Yes, Ken.
So, I mean, I assume you're a chicken owner, and that's why you're here.
I was a chicken owner without a permit, so my flock of birds had to leave the town.
Oh, okay.
But I would like to be a chicken owner again.
Got it.
Anyone else want to comment on it? Thank you very, very much.
I would just encourage you to go to the planning board too and just ask them, because they've got some, you know, they've got an open session too, so just speak.
I will do everything I can. Thank you, Emily.
Would anyone else like to speak on any topic tonight? No? All right. Then we'll go on to licenses.
Committee vacancies.
We have the new one? Oh, the committee vacancies.
Yep.
Sorry, we have a revised schedule tonight.
So for December 3rd, 2018, a list of committee vacancies, we have 2 open seats for the Agricultural Commission, 1 for the CCA Advisory Committee, 4 for the Civics Committee, 1 for the Community Action Program Committee, 3 associate member positions available on the Council on Aging, up to 21 seats available on the Cultural Council, 4 Energy Conservation Committee seats, 2 Holiday Decorating Committee seats, trying to fill 2 for the Middlesex Canal Commission. Anybody that would like to apply for the Parade Committee, all are welcome. 2 for the Personnel Board, 5 for Public Celebrations Committee, 2 for the Recycling Committee, 3 for the Sign Advisory Committee, and 2 seats available for the Skate Park Committee. If you're interested in in serving on any of the town boards or committees, please feel free to apply at the town website or contact the town manager's office. The phone number for that's 978-250-5201. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
Yep.
All right, now we have licenses. Roadside vendor Ken Matthews, 211 Chelmsford Street through 12/26/18. Is Ken here tonight? If you can identify yourself and what you're looking for.
Ken Matthews. I'm looking just for the roadside vendor license to sell Christmas trees.
All right. Have you done this before?
No.
In town?
No, not in this town.
Okay. And what is that? Is there something at 211 Chelmsford Street?
It's a commercial building. It's vacant right now.
So will the trees be inside or outside?
Outside.
They'll be outside. Any questions?
That's the brick square building, right?
Yes, correct.
This is not done in conjunction with a charity or anything like that, right?
Hopefully it will be, but not yet. We're going to donate some money to charities, but that's not set yet on how much.
Right? Any questions? Have a motion.
You can do a motion.
Sure, I'll make a motion to approve the roadside vendor license for Ken Matthews at 211 Chelmsford Street through December 26, 2018.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a roadside vendor, Elmo's Flower and Garden at 55 Graniteville Road through 12/25/18.
Good evening. My name is Andre Daigle from Almo's Flower and Garden Center. Looking to sell trees and wreaths and kissing balls at Sully's Ice Cream Stand.
Whose ice cream stand?
Sully's?
Oh, Sully's,
Yep.
okay. Have you done this before?
Yeah, for over 10 years.
10 years?
Yep,
You've done it before.
yep.
How are the prices this year?
A little bit up.
Oh.
Wreaths are high.
Shortage of Christmas trees.
It's a shortage of wreaths this year.
All right. Any questions for anyone? Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the roadside vendor license for Elmo's Flower and Garden at 55 Graniteville Road to go through December 25th, 2018.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have a one-day beer and wine license for St. John the Evangelist Parish. Anyone here from them tonight? No? Have we done this before?
Yeah.
Many,
Each year? Many years?
many times a year.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the one-day beer and wine license for St. John's the Evangelist Parish at 115 Middlesex Street for their Christmas party to be held at 12/23/2018.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye?
Aye.
5-0. Thank you. All right, so this brings us to the continuation of the tax classification public hearing. We would entertain anyone who would like to speak on the issue, who would like to come up. If you could, take as much time as you want, but at the same time, try not to go over old facts that, someone else may have covered.
Good evening. My name is John Edward, and I'm from Proctor Road, and I'd like to identify myself as a member of the Tax Classification Study Committee, just so I can make it clear that I am not representing the committee tonight. And actually, I'm presuming that you've probably made up your mind at this point. I have no illusion that I'm going to change anyone's mind tonight, but I would like to put the board on notice. Because if you do choose tonight to institute a split tax rate, just be aware that it will happen. It's pretty much inevitable. At some point, somebody is going to stake a claim that some business in Chelmsford went out of business or moved out of Chelmsford because of your action. May or may not be true, may not make sense given the big tax cut that corporations have been getting recently, but you are going to get blamed. But I also want to make you aware that if you do institute a split tax rate, there are probably going to be households that will not go out of business. Households that don't get foreclosed on because they could actually make the mortgage payments. Households where people are not evicted because they could actually make the rental payments. Or maybe it'll just be a household where they can turn the thermostat up from 55 to 58 during the winter. Maybe it will be a household where they can actually pay the bills and not have to run up more credit. Maybe it will be a household that can actually fill the prescriptions that the doctor says for the medicines that they need. It could be a household where they will actually have a chance to provide their children with a nutritionally adequate diet. It could be a household that can afford to save a little bit of money so that they can actually go to Middlesex Community College and change their position. I think maybe a different way of expressing what I just said. During the public hearing process, you hear a lot about economic development. Economic development should not be the objective. The goal of the Board of Selectmen for public policy should be economic and social development. policies that are good for the entire town, not just the business community. And one more point, just in case somebody tries to stake an issue on this. There's decades worth of data that show that lower taxes for businesses promotes neither economic nor social development. Again, I'm not here to convince anybody of how they should vote tonight. I'm sure you will all vote for what you think is the right thing to do. But what I'm here to say is that if you do the right thing tonight, you can be very proud of your vote. Thank you, sincerely.
Thank you. Your comments?
Good evening. My name is Laura McLaughlin. It's my husband, Richard McLaughlin, from 6 Cambridge Street, and would like to speak to the tax classification issue. We individually own and operate our own businesses out of a commercial property on Glen Avenue. And he's a commercial contractor. I do behavioral health services. So I'm very aware of sort of some of the social implications that this might have. But specifically, I think this hits on such a personal level as well as sort of an business level for both of us. In our experience, many of those who live and run small businesses in Chelmsford, and I'm sure many of them are here, are some of the most committed neighbors and volunteers that we have. They're often the people that we don't realize we depend upon to add the supportive or homey touches to this town. And if a split tax rate is approved, the secondary losses to Chelmsford may be initially unseen by many, but there will be losses nonetheless, and losses that will affect us culturally over time. Like many Chelmsford residents with small businesses, my husband can't write off the amount of time he spends away from his family putting up decorative lights, attending parade meetings, putting up flags year after year, not to mention the countless other things he does willingly for the community. Likewise, I can't write off the time that I spend assisting residents with behavioral health concerns while off the clock. Each resident with a business provides something extra to this community that can't be quantified. If you look at just the dollars, some of us may be able to squeeze out the extra money out of those budgets, but what will be the strain? What will be the unforeseen loss? Exhausting or demoralizing already generous resources will have its own effects on our town. Small business owners who are residents will have to work harder. We'll have to work harder. And therefore may be less able, or even worse, less likely, which is the worst, to think that people might be less likely to contribute or volunteer. The connections that keep our community strong is what's at risk. And I just would like to ask the board to please consider carefully the ripple effects that this decision will have on our community, and specifically the burden it will place on Chelmsford residents that also own small businesses. Thank you. That's all for tonight.
Thank you.
Good evening. Tom Desimone, 10 Footpath Road. So I very much can appreciate the small businesses and what they do for the town of Chelmsford. And I would absolutely echo and would not want to dispute any words that were just said. They are vital to this town and to this community, not only Chelmsford, but Massachusetts. With that being said, without residents, you don't have a town. And residents cannot continue to take on the additional burden and the additional costs of just life in general. Things get more expensive over time. You're going to have to generate additional revenues and figure that out. Without residents, there will be no small businesses and there will be no town. Over the past 10 years, I believe the residents have accounted for 81% of the revenue generated from real estate taxes. That's gone up 1% over the last 10 years, while commercial businesses went down 1%. If we continue that focus, young families will not be able to come to, they're going to look at Billerica, they'll look at Westford, which has lower tax rates and so forth. We're in a unique position, 495, Route 3, the overlay committee that's going on with 129, that's where our focus should be. You bring in businesses, it's not the tax rate that they're looking at talent, they're looking at access to highways, as you already know. So just keep that in mind. Without residents, there is no town, and we just can no longer take on additional taxes and the additional burden of just year-over-year cost, the cost of living increases that we all experience.
Thank you.
And the one thing I want to cite on that is Kronos. They went from Chelmsford to Lowell, just under $18 per thousand. Lowell has a $29 tax rate. I'm sure they got incentives to move, but that's $29 to $17 when you start out flat. We can attract businesses by offering them tax incentives as well if we want them in this town. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Rick Aronovitz. I'm from Harrington's Liquor, now Lincoln Liquors. And I don't want to speak so much to the pros and cons of this exact measure because we all know what they are. I want to talk a little bit more about how it affects us philosophically and over the long term. In general, if you tax something, you get less of it. If you subsidize it, you get more of it. And you should be really wanting to tax businesses at a lower rate and get more of them because they make money for the town. They don't send anybody to school. Where's most of the tax money go? To the schools and to domestic disturbances and police actions and all kinds of things like that. Businesses are fairly cheap for the town to support and to house and pay the same as everybody else, where they really should be paying less. So if you want to encourage businesses and lower the tax rate for the residences, get more business. I happen to live in Carlisle, where there's almost no business. Tax rate is through the roof. In general, what really happens is that everybody looks at these things and says, gee, that's got a lot of merits, and there are some merits to tax classification. What nobody's looking at is the overall effect of all these regulations put together. Think about it. Why does a house in Massachusetts cost 3 or 4 times as much as an equivalent house in the Carolinas or in Texas? We have way more regulations. The builders are not able to provide enough supply at a reasonable price to keep the supply and demand in balance. It takes months and months and months of permitting, takes all kinds of regulations and extra costs. So we've sort of protected people with all these extra regulations, all meant to protect them against fire hazard or flood hazard or this, that, or the other thing. And each one of those has its merits. But the accumulated effect is, houses are too expensive, people can't afford them. If you really want to give relief to the taxpayers who are here saying, you know, we need to have residents and so therefore we have to have lower taxes, well, then let's find a way to reduce the burden for everybody, including the businesses. So what really happens is you get death by 1,000 cuts. So, well, let's raise the license fee for this. Let's raise the business tax for that. Each one of those things individually, not so bad. Cumulative effect, I have tenants that are struggling. I happen to own properties in both towns that have classification and in towns that don't. I can tell you there's a real significant and measurable detrimental effect to people who would like to rent and start businesses. When I started my business in 1977, I had $10,000. That was enough to open a 36,000 square foot drugstore. And the government didn't bother you about anything. You went to town hall, they said, give us $5, go away, don't bother us. Today, it would take high 6 figures to do the same thing before you even start. Planning board, site plan review, 6 months worth of studies, traffic studies, fire rules and regulations, handicapped access, on and on and on. Each one of those things individually, not so bad. Licenses that used to be $5, they're now $500. Add them all together, it's really hurting business. And that's why we're not seeing so many mom and pops. We're seeing chain stores that can afford it, and they can spread the costs out. So in terms of philosophy, you know, that government governs best, which governs least. That was Thomas Jefferson. And being fair to everybody is important. Treating everybody the same is important. It's not fair to people who sign long-term leases expecting one set of rules, and now you've changed the rules on them. It's not fair to people who invested in property. Now you've changed the rules on them midstream. So if you are determined to do it, give people fair notice. Say, okay, I want to have classification starting 5 years from now, 7 years from now. And what's really going to happen is it's going to put more pressure, if you want to attract new business, to have people come in and say, well, you know, you got to give us a break on these taxes. And you're going to wind up giving more special interests and special tax breaks and more and more things like that, which are unfair to the people who are already here paying the high rates. So in general, I'd like you to take a look at the long-term issue here, because it starts out, well, it's only a 10% difference. I can tell you that in places like Framingham, they're at the maximum the state will allow. It started off small, and it grew. And that's what would happen with this, and it will become, because the pressure on the next set of selectmen, or the selectmen 5 years down the road, is, oh, we've got a budget crisis, let's go to a higher classification rate. And it's a slippery slope, and it's very detrimental in the long term. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Nancy Loisel, 139 Main Street. We own a few residential houses and a commercial building in Chelmsford, and we live in Chelmsford. With that said, I can see both sides. We are not for the split tax rate. If it's approved, the commercial rents will have to go up. We've had some tenants in our building since 1988 when it was built. Will they have to leave and find cheaper rents in another town? I thought the town was trying to attract more businesses and not chase them out of town or make the owners of the buildings have to sell in some cases. And my other point is the town wants to bring more commercial buildings to the Route 40 area by rezoning it. Splitting the tax rate will not help fill any future buildings to be occupied. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Glenn Thorne, 18 Pinewood Road, also a town meeting representative. It is a momentous decision that you're facing here tonight for a number of reasons. I've had a chance over the past week to speak to some residents, some businesses. A lot of people don't know what's going on. They really don't know that there's a tax rate change being considered right now. And so I tried to explain it to them. I think I did okay in explaining it to them. There's a lot of residents in the town and not that many businesses. And what's being considered is to have more of the residential taxes paid for by the businesses. And one person asked me a question I actually hadn't thought of. So that means that the people that own the $600,000, $700,000 homes, maybe even $1 million homes, they're going to get the biggest break. And I said, well, actually, that's true. If we split the rate, the people with the biggest properties get the biggest break. And they also said if that's the direction of the town, well, why don't we build more expensive houses? And we can do that because they're going to get more of the tax break than the smaller houses. So I really didn't know how to argue that, but I said, well, that's probably the case, but I don't think that's why it's being considered. The people that I spoke to from the businesses were kind of on the fence when I told them about what was going on, because they do make a lot of contributions to the town that may not seem big to us. It's $50 to the Little League, it's $100 to somebody else, it's $100 to somebody else. And they said, well, if the town is going to treat us differently, and it's going to cost me $800, $1,800, I'm going to have to look at my charitable interaction with the town. And I said, that's understandable. And he said, because I'm able to hire part-time people now, and I'm able to hire a full-time person now because I have the income that I have, the economy is good. But if the town treats us differently than the rest of the town, we're going to have to make changes. And I think one of the earlier speakers spoke about, what the difference is between the values of a town where everybody is considered to be treated fairly with a common tax rate, and the values of a town where businesses are different than residences, where in fact businesses and their ability to pay, even though they're a very small fraction of the town, are going to be pitted against the residences so that residence taxes are going to be paid by businesses. That's what a split rate does. I thought this was somewhat problematic because I couldn't really explain why somebody would want to do that. And we understand that there are some people that are having difficulty, paying their bills in town and so forth. So one person asked me, why doesn't the Board of Selectmen work on solving that problem instead of trying to readjust all the taxes in town? They seem to have a sensitivity for people that are trying, to stay in the town and pay their taxes in the town. But by splitting the rate, biggest advantage goes to the most expensive homes, and it may or may not solve the problem with some people having a difficulty paying their taxes in the town. I said there really is only partial mechanisms for how people that are having difficulty paying taxes, such as rebates and other kinds of things that they can get to lower their tax burden. But they said, why doesn't the selectmen focus on that versus changing the rates in the whole town? So it came down to kind of a balancing act. I explained to them as best I could about keeping the levy limit in some kind of balance. In other words, and somebody suggested you take a 10-year rolling average of the difference between the residential rates and the business rates, and the next year you drop off the 10th year ago and add the next year on. So you've got a 10-year average. They seem to think that, that could be okay. And if we construct the rate so that the levy balance is a look back 10 years trying to balance off businesses with residences over that period of time, they said, well, that might be fair. Everybody seemed to think that balanced taxes for everybody would be fair. So, there was brought up the point, if we treat both businesses and residences in town equally, of equal value, of equal importance, then the tax rate stays the same. If we wanted to do something to make an adjustment for the burdens that are falling on residences because business values are going down, then they kind of like that balancing the levy limit. So everybody knows the names of the people that sit on the board. They understand your commitment to the town. And they said, well, what does the board want its legacy to be? And if I can summarize it, I can best put it in the words, does the board want its legacy to be the board that split the town, that pitted businesses against residences, or the board that balanced the town, trying to keep the levy limit at some kind of proper proportion over a period of time? I would suggest that keeping the tax rate as it is right now, where everybody pays according to their assessed value, would be the best way. But it's much better to be the board that balances the town than the board that splits the town.
Thank you.
How you doing? David Bishop. I live at Lovett Lane. I'm also an owner of a company here in Chelmsford, Pro AV Systems. We're over on 129. We're about a $20 million AV company, 70 employees, and I just want to say that Chelmsford is a very nice place to do business in. To all the same points that a lot of people spoke about, tax rate, I just wanted to say, is something that does actually come into consideration. A few years ago, we pretty much were outgrowing our space, signed a long-term lease in town. And Billerica is a little bit more of an extreme if you want to look at their split tax rate. I think it's over 33. But I can't tell you how many buildings we actually walked through. That end of, right near Burlington, area of Billerica, we could have moved into 30 buildings in there, realistically. And, we decided to stay in Chelmsford. and the tax rate was one of the deciding factors on that, a major one, actually. We moved from Westford originally. You know, being in town, we love this town. You know, we hire a lot of high school kids every summer, do what we can to help. And, you know, it is something that would come into account if the tax rate does go up. We might have to look at going elsewhere. I mean, it's not a threat. I mean, it's not, you know, I don't want to come up here and threaten you guys like, oh, we're going to leave the town. But, I mean, I know that, you know, taxes are probably down from a business standpoint. You know, Kronos left, Comcast changed buildings. But I can also say that, you know, having a business in town, like every day, our employees leave our building and go left into the center of town. And they all have lunch, and places are great. And I'm sure that, you know, Kronos moving out, DCU hasn't exactly filled that void. I mean, they couldn't. But, you know, there's a couple empty buildings there right on 129 that are prime areas. And I wouldn't want the tax rate increase to prevent business from actually moving into there. When, you know, a lot of the talk about talent and, you know, companies, I can tell you that our customer base, we do AV, is heavily in Boston and then Salem, New Hampshire north. So we're in kind of a nice little spot, but the whole area of Burlington, Woburn, you know, northern Billerica, those are pretty nice also. And, you know, it's nice to be in Chelmsford, and the tax rate is definitely one of the main reasons that we do stay. Well, and other than being residents. So that's all I wanted to say. It's, you know, I know it's a difficult decision and multifaceted, but I wanted to weigh in our support for keeping it the same.
Thank you. Anyone else? Cut off at the pass.
Hey, Steve Flynn, I'm Precinct 3 Rep, Dayton Street. I wasn't going to get up, okay? But when on the ballot and the people in town overwhelmingly asked you guys to discuss this situation, I've been watching this for 20 years. And I went back the other night, and we have some major corporations in this town, and not one of them ever came to discuss the split rate. And I'm a corporate guy, and the main reason for that is that they know they have a great location in Chelmsford there. You have all the major highways and so forth. And believe it or not, I feel sorry for the smaller business, don't get me wrong. But the largest business guys, the last thing they look at, be honest with you, and I've opened many, many developments in New England, is the tax rate. It's the location and the population around that location. Now, if a business in town here has never came to voice their opinion, what does that tell you? They're happy they're here. Taxes do not play a role with the corporations, trust me, unless it's completely out of whack. And I don't think we're going to be out of whack. You know, it's a friend of mine just called me the other day, and he says, Steve, how do you feel living in the poorest town in the Commonwealth? Town. I says, how do you judge that? He says, well, it's a thing called the senior circuit breaker law. It's based on income. Income. We're #1 in Massachusetts. Town. Why is that? Because the income of the seniors in this town, and not just the seniors, but basically, is so low that they qualify for it. Now, that hit me when he said that poorest town in Massachusetts. And he explained it to me, jokingly, but not really, that we're #1. And that is deprived by income. The seniors in this town need help. And not just the seniors, guys. The young people with families here and so forth, they all need help. Now, for 20 years, this has been going on. And I can see the business viewpoint here in town. I have friends that have businesses here. But something has to be done for the relief of the people who have paid taxes in this town for 40 and 50 years, okay? And these folks were not involved with this 401k back in 1986 because the majority of these elderly people don't have that type of pensions and so forth. So when I go down to the senior center and they come up to me and say to me, are we going to do anything, you know? And I say, it is not up to me. It is up to the town to do something, to help them somehow to get that few extra dollars that they can, you know, do other things that they don't have today. I know it's a tough situation for you board members and so forth. The town is watching you guys, and they're going to question, and either way you go, why. And I just wish you the best of luck in whatever you do, but think of what I just said. Large corporations in this town here do not look at the tax rate, okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Dr. John Crane. I'm a resident and a business owner, and I would first like to thank the police, the emergency, and the fire department, because after 42 years of practice, I had a truck come through my building a month ago. And anyone who thinks that the businesses don't get services of the town is standing very incorrect. They were wonderful. The response was phenomenal. I was back in business in 2 days. There's one fellow in particular I'd like to thank, and that's the building inspector. And the building inspector basically told me what I needed to do, how to get it done, and how to get going again. So that's how I want to start this. I've had services as my business from the town. I'm not saying we just pay and we don't get anything. We certainly do. I am second generation in Chelmsford. My kids are third. I have grandchildren that are fourth. We live in town. We intend to stay in town. One thing that bothers me about all of this is, and I have to be a little careful, the senior citizens, the articles in the Lowell Sun, you people, Father Flynn, everyone's concerned about the senior citizens. It's a fact. All right. My mother's 93 years old. She's lived in town for 65 years. She's feeling this. I sympathize with that. My daughter's in town. My granddaughter is probably going to be in town. They're going to be here for a lot of years. The direction that things are going right now, I do not think is going to reduce anyone's taxes. The classification situation is not going to eliminate taxes. It will lower the citizens' taxes for the first year, definitely. Very possibly the second year. The third year, unless spending goes down by a significant amount, I do not think you're going to find that. The net cost won't decrease. The net income from taxes has to match it. We're not the federal government. You're not going to create Chelmsford money. So I think what you're considering doing is basically not only shifting the burden from businesses to, from residents to businesses, but I think you're shifting it down the road. If you can encourage business, I was here 42 years before I used any services. That's it. It's as simple as that. I'm using myself as an example. I don't know if that's a fair way to classify it, but that's the fact of it. The situation for most businesses, I don't think we use near what I, as a citizen, use. I pay for my own trash collection. I pay a higher water rate, which I know isn't in the taxes, but I do. Everything I do in business costs me more than as a residence. As far as the bottom line of what your taxes are going to be, I think a better approach to it would be to encourage more business. We have an individual now, the town hired to do that. I think it's absolutely the right direction. The 129 overlay, I think, is a wonderful idea. All right. As far as the situation in Chelmsford versus adjacent towns, my simple answer to that is, why do you want to live in Chelmsford? I have no intention of leaving, nor do my kids, nor will my grandkids. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Tom Ellsworth. I represent WNA, one of the corporate people. I do not live in town. I personally don't have a stake in this. I have sisters live in town, but I have to take a little umbrage with what was said. We do look at taxes. We look at everything to keep our business viable in this town. We employ over 500 people. We pay almost $300,000 a year in property taxes. We have to look at these to stay viable against competitors, against foreign competition. So it is important to us. That is why I am here. I don't have much more else to say than that's what we do. It's not something that we just ignore. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name is Kathy Slow. I'm a resident here in town. I have been for the last 16 years. I am also the manager of the Chelmsford Mills. up in Vinyl Square. There's been a lot of talk about big business versus small business. The reality is that the big businesses, they can come to you, they can negotiate a rate. What this impacts more than anybody else are your small businesses. So for me, personally, as the manager of that property, I have 58 of them in my buildings. They are all going to feel this hit because none of them are in a position where they're going to negotiate with the town for a better rate. If you want to bring in big business and fill your big corporate buildings, they will be looking to you to negotiate that rate. Your small businesses aren't in a position to do that, and as a landlord, we're going to cover that cost, and we are going to raise rates, and that is going to start pushing people out. That because we need to cover our cost, which means our rents are going to go up, which will have an impact on my 200 square foot office and my 10,000 square foot space. It does have an impact, and it is not a balanced impact, and that's the point that I would like to make. It is not balanced across the business community either. Your small businesses are going to feel it a whole lot more than your corporate businesses that are then in a position to come back and negotiate. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name's Louise Tremblay, and I've been a business owner in town for 75 years. And I am one of those small businesses that closed. And I feel very bad for Vinyl Square because I think it has a great impact on the whole area. And to put extra burden on still me that owns that building, and I also own a home here that I pay high taxes on. So I think you need to consider the small businesses like these people have discussed tonight. Because with the money income to keep up with your property, to pay the taxes, there's no extra money to do repairs on your building by the time we pay for trash. We don't get extra services. There's nobody in my building that goes to school. So my taxes go directly to the other families here in town. And I think you need to think of it really strong before you change the tax rate. For people like I that have kept a business going for 75 years, my family has contributed to any project in this town, any committees, and I just think you need to do some homework on it and think of the small businesses. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Brad Welch. I'm president of Welch Welding and Truck Equipment on Middlesex Street in North Chelmsford. I'm not a resident of the community. My father started the business in 1977, moved from Lowell into Westford, and chose Chelmsford as the community to start his roots in his business as he went forward. Chelmsford's been a tremendous community for my family, and would certainly comment to you folks that one of the reasons my father chose Chelmsford was with respect to the tax benefits that the town showed compared to the neighboring communities. I do feel, and not to reiterate things that have been said, but I think it's important to note that you jeopardize losing businesses and having them move to other towns to take the benefits of a tax burden that can hurt a business. So I think that's the most important point to understand when you make your decisions, and I agree it's a tough decision. I can sympathize with the residents of the community with an understanding of, you know, we all want to have lower tax rates no matter where we are, whether you're a resident or a business. But The fact of the matter is that businesses generate revenues for communities, and that revenue that's generated helps the residents of the community. So I would encourage you to, not move forward with making a split rate and sticking with the program that you have now. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else? No? All right, then do we have a motion to close the public hearing?
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
5-0. All right, we have embarked on a long journey. It started last year when we had a similar vote. It eventually ended up going to the townspeople who weighed in on the decision, but just as a rudimentary question, not with all the details that come forward over time. We created a committee who did an outstanding job of vetting out all of the issues that were involved. They held many meetings, gave up tremendous amount of their personal time to do so, produced a very weighty, very documented, very detail-oriented, and very data-filled, comprehensive report at the end. We thank you for all of your comments, both tonight and in the past. And we're now down to the vote. Is Frank here tonight? Frank Green is the assessor in the town. He's announced himself many times. Just a couple of questions for you. It was said earlier that Chelmsford is the largest user of the senior circuit breaker. I think we have 880.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a large number compared to other towns?
It is. The senior circuit breaker is a tax credit, which is on your income taxes on the local or the DUI income level. It's not a tax exemption in terms of local property taxes. Data from our assessments is used for it. Our assessment, Steve would probably know better than me, I think it's 790,000.
One that just came out, okay, and it's 2015. 2017, they're always about a year in the back. We're still up there as what you just mentioned, 880, okay? They just increased it to $1,100, by the way, and you can go back 4 years. So it's a real plus for the seniors who live in town, who own an apartment, who own a condo, the mobile homes and things like that. So yeah, that's, those figures I can give you. I give you a copy of that.
One of the reasons it is widely used in Chelmsford is because of the efforts of Steve Flynn. He's been a very strong advocate of this for quite a few years, which is a good thing.
So the message is out there.
The message is out there, and this is, without question, one of the most liberal in terms of the guidelines. As he said, it's around $880,000 assessed value. I think the income levels are probably $70,000 or $80,000, which is far greater.
$88,000, and the household has gone up to $695,000.
How much for the household?
$695, I believe, right now. Your home assessment in your home. In other words, they go by the 10% of your taxes, 10% of your income, and half your water and sewer. Half your water, but not the sewer.
All right. The vote on this issue, there are many parts of the tax rate, in addition to splitting the tax rate. There's categories 1 through 10, which are a number of issues. There is an open space. There's a residential. And then there's splitting the tax rate as far as business versus residential, and then there is a small business exemption. Historically, of recent years, the board has just kind of lumped everything together for the most part and said that we would continue on with the existing rules. And that would be categories 1 through 10, plus the open space and perhaps the residential. We'll talk about if there's support for that. Well, how do you feel about just doing it all as a group, or do you want to do each one individually?
Each one. I think we should do each one individually and discuss them.
Okay. George, how do you feel about it?
Voting on them individually is the split tax rate, the open space discount, small commercial, and residential exemption should probably be addressed individually in terms of taking a vote.
But how about in terms of the categories, 1 through 9? Should they be done, 1 through 10, should they be done as a group?
What do you mean by,
The categories are, they were identified by the study, and
the exemptions are something that would be a matter of eventually going to town meeting. So whatever action you take on those would eventually go to town meeting, I believe, and then an action would be taken then.
all right.
But yes, that can be discussed here, sir.
All right, so residential, small business, splitting the tax rate, period. Which others?
The various
Open space?
exemptions, 41C, they're probably all identified. Those are the ones you could increase. The deferral is what you could increase.
Which ones?
So it was open space, a small commercial exemption of 1 to 10%.
Right.
And residential of 1 to 35%.
All right, so one of the board members had prepared a little cheat sheet, for lack of a better term.
Yep.
And they have single or split the rate, residential exemption, small commercial exemption, and open space discount. Would that?
Yes, just for the record, the open space discount, certainly you have to take a vote on it, but I just want to inform you, as we've discussed in the past, that open space discounts deals with parcels that are otherwise classified, typically the residual land, in excess of zoning sometimes. The Board of Assessors would have to designate what would be considered for open space discount, and then this board would vote on that. The Board of Assessors has not done that. Like most communities, there's only a handful of communities that actually operate with an open space discount. But we still have to, as a vote, have to take a vote on it.
And just to be clear again, this was done by Paul.
Oh,
Frank.
It was done by Frank. All right, let's get right to it. Frank did it. Thank you, Frank.
Yep.
So it's kind of listed in, I don't know, least. It starts with the maybe most important one and works down to the least, but I'm going to work up the list if that makes sense. And start with open space.
I would.
Mr. Chair?
Well, no, because you have to start
All right.
with whether
Yeah,
or
they're
not
put in
you're
the
gonna
order we're
split
supposed to do it.
By Frank.
I'm sorry?
Did they have to be put in this order?
There are no exemptions if you don't split the rate, so it's pointless to talk about them unless you've decided. what
No,
you're splitting.
that's not true.
Okay.
You could have, you don't have to have a residential.
Right.
But, I mean, I feel that the single or split rate is the most important. I feel it should be first. I don't know how the rest of the board feels. I agree.
Frank, is there any reason why you put them in that order?
No, but there isn't.
Okay, there you go.
All right. So let's put it this way. Do you feel we should go in the order that they're suggested by Frank?
Yes.
Yes.
I watched a lot of other towns, and that's the order they use.
Well, this is Chelmsford.
Yeah,
But,
that's
okay.
true.
But we will use that for the sake of argument. How's that? So the first one is a single or split rate. So the question is, and again, you can take it from the positive or the negative, and I would like to see it taken as the positive, that we agree that we should split the rate, as opposed to not split the rate. Or you can argue
Not
that.
discussing?
Is this a discussion or?
Are we
Yes.
discussing, or are we moving right to the motion?
Okay.
Well, we can have a discussion be first, and then there's going to be a discussion after we make a motion.
Okay. Well.
Is that permissible, Paul? I think it is.
You're running the meeting, but typically what happens is there's a motion put on the floor in a second, and then there's a discussion about the motion that's put on the floor, and then a vote's taken. So, and usually if there is no second, then that item doesn't get discussed. So that's traditionally the Robert's Rules order of running a meeting and calling for a vote. So typically the process would begin with a motion.
All right.
Yeah.
Do we have a motion then?
I'll make a motion that we maintain a single tax rate.
All right. The motion has been made that we keep a single tax rate.
A residential factor of 1.
Yes.
Correct. When addressing it, just for the record, that column that's highlighted on the right is a residential factor. So it'll be 1, and then the number that you should choose under that.
So the motion, again, to get it clear, is to maintain a single tax rate. Is that?
That's my motion.
All right. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
All right.
Discussion.
Now we'll have discussion.
Okay. Since I made the motion, can I begin?
I'm sorry?
Since I made the motion, can I begin?
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you. I just want to thank everybody that came today and everybody that's, made comments and provided feedback, both here in person, different locations that I've been to the past few weeks and months, and called and emailed. There's two main points that I want to make regarding how I'm going to vote on this, as you can tell how I'm going to vote on this. The first is that there's been a common theme from almost everybody that I've spoken with about the need for more business investment in town. And it's happening. I mean, maybe we're not seeing all of it, but the past couple of months, I've gone to probably at least one ribbon cutting or relaunch or something like that for businesses in town, whether it's a Holiday Inn or a DCU or restaurants or Zoe Medical, who bought the building that they're in now, and that's a good indication to me that they're going to be here for a while. There's also been a lot of business investment the past couple years around town. We've seen long-time businesses that have increased their facilities. A couple that come to mind are Triangle Service Station, Sunny Acres Nursing Home, and Blake Funeral Home. And there's more to come. There's, as was mentioned, we have an economic development director now who has been doing a fantastic job as far as bringing new businesses to town to give us a look over and see if there might be something here that's for them. We haven't seen a lot of the impact in the tax revenue from any of that yet. As the town manager mentioned, I think a few months ago, we'll be seeing that soon. So I think sometimes we just have to be patient, and I think when a year or so ago, or 2 years ago, year and a half ago, when we said we were going to start focusing so much on business investment, we thought it would be 4 or 5 years before we would see much significant, and I think we are seeing quite a bit, surprisingly so, but in a good way. The second main point has to do with fairness. Tax classification, I think, it's aptly named, because it appears to me that almost the goal of that initiative, if you want to call it that, is to divide us into groups that then there's conflict between them, whether it's between the businesses and the residents, or the seniors and the younger families. We become adversaries, and I don't think that should be the goal of tax policy. As has been mentioned by some of the speakers this evening, businesses do pay a premium. They do pay extra usually for water, for sewer. They pay a personal property tax for the furniture in their offices and some of the electronic equipment. I don't pay a personal property tax on that, so already they are paying some. There's a new fee that they're going to be hit with again this year, which is the stormwater management. I think that's going to be a surprise to some, and I hope it's something that they'll be able to cover adequately. I think it's important to have stability in budgeting. I'm sure that's a major focus of every business in town. They budget X amount for their real estate taxes every year, and they do expect a little bit of increase every year. But when they budget X and then they find out, in a week from now, that X is going to be 2 times or 3 times what they budgeted, that can definitely be a shock. And has been mentioned, a lot of the businesses in this town are really good neighbors to a lot of organizations, to the Scouts, to the sports teams, to some school organizations, to other groups that need funds in order to achieve the goals that they want. And I wonder when that budget number for the real estate taxes jumps, where the decrease is going to come. And I fear, as some have, that it may be on some of those donations that they make. So, as has been mentioned, the goal of this board is to make decisions that's best for the entire town. And I still feel, I've done this many times now, I still feel the best for the entire town, the fairest for the entire town, is to maintain a single tax rate. Thank you.
And would you like to go next, since you seconded?
Sure. So, my thoughts, I could probably talk all night on this, and I hope this doesn't come across as too boisterous or too much credit here, but when I look at this whole situation, and I ran and was elected on the fact that I said I would do everything I could to increase the income side of the balance sheet for the town and work to encourage business development. And, when we first got in, Glenn, you and I worked on a job description for the business development director. We had the board, the five of us, sort of put together a long-term plan. We knew when we sat down with other development directors from other towns that this was going to be something between a 7 and an 11-year plan. As a board, we promoted that thought. We brought it to town meeting. We got the budget. We hired the person. We then brought to the town meeting and supported EDC's request for money to do a marketing campaign on 129. I've attended almost all the EDC meetings. I attend almost all the planning board meetings. I've watched all of the tax classification meetings. I've read the studies. On top of that, I've gone and watched the videos for all the towns across the state this year as they've started to negotiate their tax rates to see what the large splits are doing, the small splits are doing, the people that have the single tax rate like Natick, and to try to understand where they are, if they've already gone down the road long term, if they've adopted a split. And what I see is in cities like Worcester and Fitchburg and Framingham, they're scratching their heads because what they've realized is the values are going down, and they're wondering, what do we do now? And there's a lot of confusion in the definitions of what we're talking about here between a business owner, the property owner, and the resident. And there's a disconnect between who the property owner is. They'll be feeling the tax hit, and the business that's inside that property who's paying the rent. And there's I think there's even in from Worcester to Framingham, Fitchburg, that area, the towns out there have grouped together to commit to doing a reduction in their split rates because they're seeing what's happening. And there are some studies out that have shown that, and I found those over the weekend, that the question put to task isn't whether businesses aren't going to come to town or you're going to get businesses that go out of business. I think the studies all show that what happens over time is the value of the properties go down. And when a value of a property goes down, it shifts the tax back to the residents. And one of I agree the study's fantastic. On page 5, I think it is, it points out how you value a business. And the number one way you value a business is you ask what's the income the business drives, and that income is what's your gross income in minus your expenses. And then they take a capitalization rate, which goes, when you look at capitalization rates, it really depends. It's a required rate of return. When you define what a capitalization rate is. And those depend on what the type of business it is. They're different for apartment buildings or restaurants and so forth. A restaurant, which is going to have a higher rate of return because they're taking more risk. So when you use that formula, the values go down if you add expenses to the businesses. And Pat brings up a great point. The storm water next year is going to be a hit to a lot of business in town. And that could be as high as $25,000, Paul, for a business.
Well, certain business probably.
Yeah, so some of the bigger businesses. So I think that's going to be a surprise. I think in this year, if you split the rate and then add the storm water on top of that, the one thing that report did say is not to shock the system. And in there, that clearly, if you double whammy them this year, is going to be a shock to the system. And then you get into the question about elasticity of the businesses that are in town. You have some businesses, like a Walmart or a Panera, they're not going to move. They want the location. They don't care. They're going to raise their prices and shift that to the consumer. But you also have businesses in town that can move. Small architectural firms. My office, for example. If my rents go up, I have the ability to move. They moved my office back in September, and they did it in under 5 hours. So, you have some businesses that it will affect that could easily say, I'm out. And you have some businesses that will be here no matter what. So it's the type of business. So when you look at the type of businesses town wants and the jobs we're going to create for our citizenship, you want high-paying, high-quality jobs. That's what we all want. We don't want $10 an hour Walmart jobs or $15 an hour Panera jobs. We want those jobs where you're going to be working at a software company or jobs at an architectural firm, at a financial planning firm that pay well and where the owners encourage their employees to increase their education and further themselves in life. So I think it's more of a much more involved answer when you look at this. I think, I did get one phone call today where someone said, please split the rate, I'm a resident. and we had a nice conversation, and I thought it interesting. There was some misconception. We're talking about, I think, maybe a savings of about $200 to the average resident this year. Taxes won't go down; they're still going up. It's just not going up as fast. And I don't know how far $200 really goes to the average homeowner. And I stand to gain a lot. I own about $1.5 million of property in town. So for me, that would be a win. But I don't, from a business standpoint, my business is small. I'm not going to pay a lot more. But from a, standpoint where I'm sitting, the long-term best result for this town right now is not to split the rate. And I see that when I'm watching these tax classification committees in other towns trying to figure out how we get off of the addiction of shifting the rates year after year after year to the businesses. Because once you start down this road, it's not going to stop. You're going to have to keep doing it over time just to keep the balance between the two. Thanks.
Thank you. George, you have anything to weigh in on?
Well, I'm voting for split tax rate. I gave my word I was going to do that. I think the time has come. I'm not looking for a major split, and I think it's fair, and I think the residents have been carrying the load for a long enough time, and we've supported the businesses. I went to all the meetings, the economic development meetings all summer, all last summer, every week. We attended those meetings. We've tried to get other businesses in other areas brought in, and we had drawback from people who've got up and opposed what we're talking about. They just said the opposite tonight up here as to what they did, what their actions really were. So I believe that it's time we make a change, and if it doesn't work out, we change back, that's all. That's what I'm at.
Please, no comments. Emily, how about you?
So I think this is a question of more philosophy, but I also think it's a question of when you've been doing the same thing over and over again, expecting some huge, vast change or a different result, and you're not getting it, and you keep trying. Like, that's great for piano practice, but at a certain point, not even that's the right course of action. I think that over the past 40 years, you've had wages go down. You have had corporate taxes go down. We have tried trickle-down economics. It does not work. Flat taxes do not work. We've got ample evidence of that. I know that it's impossible to change anything at a federal level right now, but I mean, I operate a business in a town with a $34 to $17 commercial to residential rate. It's double. It's fine. You plan it in, you pass it along. When taxes at the top earner level were high, people were actually more charitable because they wanted to get their tax brackets lower. When you lower the corporate tax rates, corporations tend to hoard money, and they offshore it, and they don't put it back in. We're not seeing, we just saw a jobless recovery of the last recession. I don't see how doing the same thing over and over again and expecting huge differences is going to help. I also have not heard from Lisa Maroney and the Route 40 committee. She was there last week. She spoke of what businesses were looking for, and taxes were not mentioned. In the few studies where they have looked at taxes as a factor, they've been extremely low on the list. So sure, they're a factor when you look at the overarching numbers, but they're not. They are outweighed by your workforce, by your accessibility of your business, by transportation means, whether or not their business is accessible, whether or not workers can get there, and again, workforce, how they're educated. It is true that when you lower the tax rate 1 year, it will still go up. It has to still go up because inflation is real and we have to pay for things. So what this does is it drops that level down a little bit. It's still going to go back up, but you still have that chunk of money that otherwise you would have spent in taxes. The insulation required to look at $300, which is closer to the real number. The low end relief will be $200, but for a $400,000 house, which is what our average is, it's going to be more like $435. But the economic insulation it takes to say that $200, $300, or $400 is nothing, is change you find in your couch and is insignificant, is shocking to me when you consider that that represents a month of food or 2 months of food, depending on how many people are in your family. When that represents a half a month's rent for a small apartment, when you have a fixed income for somebody on Social Security of, what is it, Social Security is $13,500 at the low end. So if you can save that person living in their larger old house $400, that's significant when they're on a fixed income and they're getting, you know, their food stamps and the rest of their assistance. I think sometimes there's I think the right thing to do is to share the burden out. I think that what I've been hearing over and over again by people calling representing groups. So I've been hearing from town meeting representatives who have been talking to residents, and they are filtering that base of people. So instead of getting 20 phone calls, I get one person who has talked to 20 people or talked to 25 people, and they're saying, I have talked to these people, and that will make a difference for me. That is a huge difference. And so when I hear that, when you look at the population that will be aided by this bit of relief, and yes, taxes are still going to go up. It's the two sure things in life. It's death and taxes. So funny joke, but taxes are also how we purchase society. It's how we keep things running. It's how we fix our potholes. It's how we fix our schools. It's how we fix our roads. And given the lack of maintenance and upgrading that has gone on, maybe we should have been taxing at higher rates all along. I also would like to address this question of why can't the selectmen do something else, come up with new revenue streams? Well, in the past 12 months, this board has come up with about $3 million in revenue of offerings, and it has all been rejected due to, by and large, special interests. So, you know, at this point, I don't know, we've gone through some of the big ticket items that we can go through to look at new revenue. At this point, I'd love to hear some creative solutions from people, because I'm starting to look at the low level things like, I don't know, naming rights on fire hydrants or advertising wraps on the fire trucks. Like, what would bring in a little bit of extra money, because people keep saying we need new revenue. Well, that's great. We've turned down $3 million worth of revenue in the past year at town meeting. So you ask for solutions, they're given, and they are rejected. So by all means, if people have solutions, that's great. But if you want to reject the solutions, you still have to pay the bills. And there are no corners to cut. And we have had assessors come in and look at our finances, and they have reiterated over and over again that the folks running Chelmsford's books are honest, that our books are clean, that we manage our money well. There is a serious fault in people who did not pay for their retirements and did not fund their retirement accounts, and we are in arrears on those. We are paying the interest on them. We will be paying them for the next several years. So we have debt we have to pay off due to poor financial planning. And there's not a lot we can cut. There just isn't. So the goal is to figure out new streams of revenue, figure out how to develop, and from what I see, businesses are not monolithic. You're going to find people who are happy to open up businesses in good communities with good workers, with good highway access, and not worry about the taxes. For some it matters, for some it doesn't. But I think something's got to give.
Thank you. All right. The business community as a whole was right in bringing to the limelight that the whole issue of tax classification was a very complicated subject. That it was mentioned that when we had our referendum with the town, that there was a very simple statement and who wouldn't vote for giving themselves some more money. And that part's true, but it was a general question to give light to a committee to go out and do diligence and really discover what it's all about. And they did. They did a study that's never been done before by this town, certainly, and probably by no town in Massachusetts in terms of the length and breadth at which they went to come up with an honest assessment. And what they found, as far as my reading of the report, was they came up with no concrete answer one way or the other. And the most vehement argument by the business community, and if I was in the business community, I would argue it as well. If you raise the taxes, you are going to drive some existing businesses out, and you will deprive the town of attracting some new businesses. I don't have a crystal ball. They don't have a crystal ball. Nobody knows if that's going to happen. At the same time, you have the town doing a lot of steps to bring in economic development, and that's absolutely true. Bring in town business manager, which I championed first to the Economic Development Commission. I supported the 129 initiative and many things that were economically driven. But to say that they need a perfect storm to bring business into town, meaning that they have to keep the tax rate at where it is, where it hasn't done any good for the last whatever years, doesn't prove anything. Again, that's hearsay. What are the facts? And what are the reasons that you can legitimately split the tax rate? There's always the political reason. We just want to do it, and we want to get reelected. We want votes, all right? Well, that's subjective. But one of the legitimate reasons is if a bulk of dollars that come in from the residential side start to get larger than the dollars that come in from the commercial side, that changes the balance of the history of the town. And that's happening every year, and it has for the last 10 years. That the amount of dollars collectively that have been brought in by residents, am I correct, Frank, are larger every year, and there's no stopping that at this point. Now, going forward, if the business development team of the town is able to bring in and attract more businesses with better paying jobs and larger scope, then that trend will reverse. But that's up to future boards to look at and evaluate on their own merit. Every year there's a new board, practically, that every year there's elections and there's going to be at least probably one new member every year. And the board will change, and the views that were on that board will change. That, things are argued, and you can argue with them forever. It's been mentioned by a couple of people that, the stormwater is coming up. Well, the stormwater is coming up for every city and town in the state. So if you're a business in Billerica, you're looking at stormwater too. Am I correct, Paul? They're all looking at it. They're all in the same boat. You talk about, coming to town and looking at other towns that may be attractive. A Burlington, or a Woburn, or a Wilmington, or a Billerica. All of them have higher rates than the 1.5 that we're talking about as a maximum for Chelmsford right now. So, the choices are not so great out there in this particular area. Yes, there's only about 109 or so towns that have a split tax rate, but they're all primarily in the east. They're not in the smaller towns in the West. Chelmsford is a unique animal, and it should be deciding its future for itself. So, you can go on in arguing this point ad infinitum. But the report basically came down to, we don't know. These are the legitimate reasons you can do it. We think this side, going from the business side, have legitimate concerns. We think the residential side on this side has legitimate concerns. There are positive things that will happen on the residential side. There are positive things that will happen on the business side. But as Emily has said, the status quo has gotten us nowhere. And perhaps it's time for a change. We asked Frank to come up with a way to analyze businesses coming and going, whether it's by population of employees or by its value or something, every 6 months to advise future boards as to how things are going. We know how they've gone in the past, just the same way they always have been. So it's up to future boards to raise the rate from wherever we set it at or to lower it. You may think that it's impossible to lower it. It isn't. If the facts are there, a reasonable board will look at the facts and say that the business community is growing, they're contributing more money, and therefore there should be some leveling. To the people who say that, well, if you reduce the tax rate by splitting the tax rate this year, it goes away next year. Well, that's a big lie. It's there every year, forever, until that rate is changed, either up or down. Because you may get, let's say, $100 savings this year. Next year, you'll get the same savings, but taxes will go up because they go up every year for other reasons, not related to splitting the tax rate and not relating to changing the formula. But that same $100 will be saved every year forever, that you would be paying less next year by $100 than you would if we didn't split the tax rate. So it does go on, and the argument is made, well, people won't even know it. That's not a valid reason not to do it, because most people will know it, and every one of them will get the benefit of it. So this is not about trying to pit the business community against the residential community. It's about being just. And in the past, it has not been just, and going forward, it needs to be just. So, anyone else? All right, so we should have a vote. I think it should be a roll call vote because it's significant. I think all of these are significant. And you can go first, Pat.
On the motion,
The motion that's on the floor is for a uniform rate of 1,
Okay.
residential factor of 1.
So so the motion has been approved, motion has been made to keep the rate as a single rate.
Correct.
We had a first, a second, and discussion. All right, so now we will vote.
So my vote's yes.
Pat votes yes. Ken?
Yes.
George?
No.
Emily?
No.
And I vote no also. Do we have a second motion?
You want a motion for rate?
No, motion to split the tax rate.
But you need to identify what the split is. I mean,
That's what I'm saying. You need
right,
a-
the
you
previous
need-
vote
you
indicates
need
you're going to
a
split the
dollar
rate. Now you
against
need
a dollar against.
Right, what type of shift do you want to do, which would then translate into the residential factor?
If you
which is the
take,
Frank
if you take the 5 towns in the Route 3 corridor, they're all like $1.75 against the dollar.
They're
I'm not
75%
looking to
shift.
hurt anybody, as we said before. So, I think, whatever. So I am proposing $1.27 against the dollar, $1 against $1.27.
1.27?
1.27, which would be a residential factor of 9,411. Is that right, Frank?
That's correct.
And that represents a 6% savings on the residential rate?
I believe it does, yes, 5.89, yes.
Yeah, $438.
It increases the business rate by 27%, am I correct?
Yes.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a first and a second. Do we have a discussion?
I just want to be clear, so if we take the average $428,000 house, they're going to save $470 a year. And the average business is going to pay how much additional? 10 grand more?
Using this sheet?
Depends on the assessed value.
A big sheet somebody handed me.
It depends on...
On a million.
For the 127, the savings would be $438.
Well, I'm going on $1.8 million, so I guess it's, if I'm just going on $1.4 million, which is the average.
So the increase for the $1.4 million would be about $4,800, I believe.
All right, so So the average homeowner saves $470, but the average business pays $4,800?
$438.
And that's just.
Wait a minute.
Hold on, $438? Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, $438. So the average homeowner saves $438, but the average business pays $4,800.
Yes. Call for the vote.
Any other discussion? Pat, we'll vote then. Pat, you want to go first again?
My vote, no.
Ken?
Vote no.
George?
Yes.
Emily?
Yes.
My vote is yes. 3-2.
Could I request a photo by the lone son of the 3 selectmen on the right side, please? For the record.
Yes.
So we'll forget what we look like.
Can we just do that?
She gets some video.
You can ask them to leave the room.
Yeah, I would do that.
Disruptive.
I'll take the picture if no one else will.
We're not, I mean, we're not done.
Stalin had the presentation, or am I starting? She wasn't able to see it on TV.
I've done it enough times.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay.
I gotta throw my teacup in You can get closer, Glenn, if you want to.
So I can expand perfectly, George.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's what I'm waiting for on those items.
I think we'll be on dartboards.
Yes.
Just like that. You gonna smile?
Would you like a smile? Cheese? We're gonna be on dartboards.
Doesn't matter. They run stuff too long.
Sam, Sam,
Is there gonna be a wanted?
Sam, could you close the door?
Could be.
Like, what is that for? Is that like a wanted poster? Most people say.
It's just bullshit. Just
Just wanna know.
Yeah, but she's going back to Carlisle.
Face plastered on poles.
So Glenn, in an effort
Thank you.
to move this along, can I make a motion we adopt no residential exemption?
You're making a motion.
Yep.
Do we have a second?
I second.
Any discussion? Other than that, the residential exemption is used almost never, and is primarily involved in communities that have a lot of part year, like the Cape. Summer residences, not for particularly towns like Chelmsford or similar towns where the residents are permanent. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. 5-0. Next is the small commercial exemption. Do we have a motion?
Well, I first want to ask Frank, how do you, do we have a chart on the residential the commercial exemption, small business?
Is to,
I mean, when we were discussing it before, we had a percentage.
if it's, right, the range is 1 to 10% for small commercial exemption. There are about the same number of communities that have that particular exemption. There's about 13 communities in the Commonwealth that have it.
Okay.
And what it relies on is the fact that if a particular building has a certain number of tenants.
10 or fewer.
Those tenants have to have less than 10 employees. They individually have to do less than $1 million.
The building has to be valued at less than $1 million.
Then it goes to the building owner.
That's correct.
Who may or may not pass any savings to his tenants.
That's correct.
And it's used almost never. And 2 of the towns that use it don't have classifications. One is Westford, and there's
Who
one
just
other.
abandoned it, who just phased it out this year, fiscal 19.
So they're no longer going to
They're
have.
no longer, they've had it for about 14 years and phased it out this year.
Any other questions for Frank?
Well, I might as well, I know where this is going to go. I'll make a motion that we adopt a small commercial exemption to 10%.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion?
I'll have a little discussion on it. You know, the one thing I do get scared about, now that we're at this point, is, you know, I go to lunch at Rosie's in North Chelmsford, and, you know, she works to the bone. She doesn't have a lavish lifestyle. She can't afford to close one day, and I can't even, you know, we're grateful that we have a diner to go to. You're grateful for some of these small amenities that we do have, and my only fear is that, you know, higher tax increase, if it were to drive some of the, you know, I just would think if we could give any help to those people who are, you know, just eking by, showing up to work every day, and it's a service the town loves having. I mean, when I go to Rosie's on a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning, the line's out the door and around the corner. People are dying to get in there. And her, you know, her expenses are right in line. She's doing a great job. She has a great product. I just think it's, you know, going to be rough to hit her with that on top of the stormwater. So that's why I propose it.
And I would agree with what Ken has said, and I think a lot of the points that have been made as far as justification for having a split rate is that the larger companies are able to absorb it a lot easier, and I think this does give a small benefit, albeit small.
Frank, have you done any analysis of if this were adopted, how many actual businesses might be affected?
About 120, as near as I can tell initially. That number would probably grow as we get more data over the next year or two. But I would be basing that on the information that's sent to me by the Department of Unemployment Assistance, who have to, by law, furnish me with all businesses of 10 or fewer employees. So that's my starting point. But I believe it's an incomplete list. I believe we'd begin to find more and more businesses that fall
Do you
into that.
think that there would be, every year you deal with people who come in with requests for abatements for one reason or another.
Mhm.
Do you expect that this would contribute to making that list much bigger?
I suspect so. I suspect that they'll, once they become aware of it, and this exemption might be something they could benefit from, I would expect to get an increase in activity for that. Who knows what the horizon looks like with some of these. Like I said, it starts off with about, last year was 114. That was a conservative estimate, but I knew it would probably swell to 200 pretty quickly.
All right, so if the individual business entity had to be less than $1 million, let's say it was at the largest, $9,999,000. The increase in taxes based on our decision to split the tax rate at 1.27 would be increasing that by $2,700?
Just about that $4,800 that we quoted a few moments ago. It's about the same.
$4,800.
Well, you just said 900 million, but I think you meant 999.
Because the average, I mean,
Yeah.
when we were looking at it, the average was about $1 million that we were citing here for the 4,800. So
All
it'd be
right.
in that vicinity,
All right, so at a 10%, it would be $480.
right around there, right? So.
It's not a lot.
You know,
Well, you just gave the homeowner $400.
right, but so someone at an establishment like Rosie's or like a tap room, that just gets factored into prices. When you figure out what you have to charge for your product, taxes are factored into that. That's part of the equation you build when you're planning out your prices. So I think that's again, it's the sort of thing that actually gets passed on to the people using the service.
So you'd have a little bit less passed on to the people using the service if they had that exemption.
Yeah, but I mean,
you'd have a little bit less that would be passed on to the people using that service if they have this exemption.
fairer taxes mean people pay for services. Property taxes are regressive. If we can fix the services.
Well, be careful what you say there, because you said a fair tax is people pay for
Well,
services.
for right now, but this is the system we're in. So
No,
if it'll
but-
get passed on. It's part of the equation. It's why our beers cost what they cost. Tax is factored in.
Beers cost what they cost.
Frank, why
No.
do you have any feedback from any of your peers why this exemption is almost never used? In 340 towns in the state and
That's right.
communities, it's almost never used.
The feedback that I get when in these discussions is you can have two buildings next to each other, valued at around $900,000, and one has nine employees, the other one has 11. The exemption is granted to one and not the other, when it has no basis in the kind of revenue that those particular businesses. That's what I'm hearing. It's a good attempt to provide relief for property owners of less than $1 million. But for the people that I talk to, it tends to miss the mark.
Frank, can I ask
Okay.
you a question?
We,
We're
you
in
know,
discussion, it's,
discussion now.
we're taking it's in the middle of a vote.
So any other discussion by the board on it? All right, so do we have a motion?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the motion was the 10%.
First and second?
Yeah.
All right, we'll vote on it.
He's voted, they both
Pat, you wanna
voted,
go
yes,
first?
yes.
I vote yes.
We voted yes.
George?
Yes,
You mean to provide the exemption?
yes.
I guess the question is, Frank, can you get this accomplished in time for getting the tax bills out at the end of the month? Because you're now got to go into 130 files.
That's right, we have to create a file. It would be tight.
And what's the impact if the bills don't get out in time?
We can't send a bill out, we can't legally send a bill out. We can't, it has to be done by January 1st by law. In which case, we would have to send out an estimated bill for the third quarter, which would resemble the first 2 quarters we sent out. And the revenues would be substantially less because new growth would not be included on that.
When would you have need to know this information to do it, properly?
As soon as possible.
No, but when would you have needed to know it?
Probably a month ago. The file that I referenced was sent to us probably 6 months ago. But we needed, without the percentages or anything, I would have needed at least a month ago.
You get it as fast as you want if they know they're gonna get an exemption, don't you think?
But I mean, for me to actually do the work, to get it on the tax bills that are to be issued. What's happening is tonight Darlene's here, literally gonna go downstairs, print out the sheet that you're all gonna sign, because we had to wait till it was all finalized for real numbers. Come up here, have you sign it, jump in there tomorrow morning, have my board sign it, the clerk sign it, and then we send it off to get a recap, because what's happening is it's a bottleneck situation. If you can imagine all these communities trying to get a tax rate at the same time, here we are December 3rd, with a bill having to get out in less than a month. So we have all communities trying to get a tax rate at the same time. Then we have to, once we get the tax rate, we then have to generate the bills and get it to a printer. And these printers are dealing with the same problem. They're all dealing with communities who are trying to get a bill out at the same time. So it becomes just a bottleneck on a couple different levels, both the printer and at the Department of Revenue.
And so it's going to really clog up everything.
It would.
For everyone.
It would.
And it could be dealt by future boards very easily by doing it early enough. Because we could not do the major issue which preceded this issue.
Yes, but we could have. But we didn't.
We didn't. All right, blame us. But it is a problem in actually doing it.
I'd feel better doing it, to be honest with you.
I think where it's not used, I think where it's not used for so many good reasons, because it's
The
been
problems
tried
we
and
heard
failed.
about, whatever problems businesses are gonna have are gonna be from the small guy, not the
But
larger guy.
it's ineffective in what it's trying to do, and
Frank, can it be done?
If you vote, I'll find a way to get it done. I'll have no choice.
You're voting the same way, Judge?
Yep.
Okay, Emily?
no.
I say no, but it passes 3-2.
10%, right?
So the
Open space discount?
the open space discount, do we?
I'll make a motion that we do not adopt an open space discount.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Stay on that for a second.
Thank you, Frank.
There's one more piece of information the board needs to be notified of, and that's excess levy capacity. I don't know if Darlene has that number based on these 2 votes? Okay. Because that's part of the process.
So with the 27%, the excess capacity for this year will be $22,401.99, and we'll also have an overlay amount of $904,000, which is right within our 5-year estimate, what we usually use every year.
Thank you.
Okay.
And Darlene, they have to sign, right? They have to sign acknowledgement of the...
The only, the problem being is that I just need to go down and just change the, to the commercial exemption to yes.
Okay.
Because on here it's just saying no,
Okay.
so I'm just going to go down quickly and change that. Then go ahead. I don't think that the numbers that Frank needs to do for the commercial is going to change my numbers, but
Don't put it in.
I think it's, yeah, I think Frank and I better go down and just kind of just do that real quick and just see what the numbers change. Because I'm not sure what we've just never done that on the impact.
Do you need
so
the whole board to sign?
Yes.
Yes, I have to have them. The Department of Revenue will not allow me to submit anything until they have all 5 of your signatures.
She'll have it before, she'll have it before the end of your meeting this evening. Thank you.
Reports and presentations. Mike, you have a presentation tonight on traffic study?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. I just like being at the podium. It's much more comfortable, and besides, I'm hiding behind the computer. So the presentation that I have this evening is, its basis lies in the fact from the out of the Route 40 presentation that we did over the summer, and then it was updated for the Route 40 committee, and then I put in some of the other studies that we've performed recently at the request of the board and as a result of some of the calls that have come in. Watch this. It's not.
You need to go back to your desk.
Go ahead, Mike. I can run it from here.
All right, if you want to go to the next slide, please.
Actually, you can't.
Just hit the space bar, perhaps.
Space bar.
So we'll start first in the Route 40 area, and I should preface this by saying that the counts that have been used, that I used when we were looking at rezoning Route 40 as well as the studies here, have all been done by NIMCOG at no charge to the town. David Tilton has been helping me with these, and these are sites that have been used historically to track the data going back to 2006. So there's one at the Westford line, just before you cross, right about where Rivard Trucking and the Loisel building is up around Doris Drive. The one east of Route 3 is right in front of the entrance to Scotty Hollow, just before Lynn Ave. And the last one is just as you're entering into Vinyl Square.
One thing, how do they do the traffic study for people who don't know how it's done?
Okay, what they do have is they have a device. You'll often see the tubes on the road. They look like lines or long, thin tubes, rubber tubes going across the roadway. And there's a metal box, usually somewhere tied to a telephone pole with a chain. And inside, that counts as the vehicles hit the 2 different tubes. It can tell the weight, the distance, and it can estimate the size of the vehicle, the length of the vehicle, so that they can put them into one of approximately 15 different classifications. So they can distinguish between anywhere from a motorcycle, passenger vehicle, all the way up to 6-axle vehicles, a semi with a dump on the back, and we'll get to that in a minute. So if you would, Mr. Manager. So I had a slide similar to this over the summer, and this is really the traffic volume that we're looking at on a 24-hour period along Route 40. The red lines, to those who are at home, represent the traffic coming over at the Westford line. The yellow column is the traffic east of Route 3, and the blue is what's happening at Vinyl Square. And as you can see, the traffic drops off significantly to the east side of Route 3, and more so as it gets to Vinyl Square. And while we don't have an awful lot of data that would specifically explain this, what it appears to be, if you're out there in the morning, is a lot of people are getting off Route 3 and cutting through Chelmsford and Westford to get over to Route 495. And then there's a certain amount of traffic that's cutting up Swain Road, and that disappears as you get down to Vinyl Square. So there's traffic counts that go both east and west, but these are totals. These are combined totals for both of those directions, but it shows you in a 24-hour period the amount of cars that are going across Route 40. And there was a question from the Route 40 committee from Mr. Walsh, and I neglected to email him, but he wanted to know comparatively what that would be like in anywhere else in town. The last traffic study done on Route 4 showed that approximately 24,000 cars a day pass between the Route 3 interchange at North Road and the 495 bridge. But we're also seeing approximately 15,000 cars a day combined going between the 495 bridge and the center of town. So that should give you an idea of how many cars are coming across Route 40 at the Westford line.
Mike, can you, excuse me if you interrupted, can you do me a favor on that, that last segment you just talked about from the Rotary to 495, right?
Yes.
Now, there's no heavy trucking that's allowed there. Is that on is that 24 hours a day?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Can you tell me when that was passed and how it was passed? No, I don't expect you to give me an answer tonight if you don't have it.
You mean research the truck exclusion on Route 4?
And how it got accomplished and whatever. I mean, only because we've had and what the qualifications would be and restrictions. Because I've had, believe it or not, and the last time we talked about Main Street, and you said a lot of the trucks were going up, and I said, where are they going? I don't believe that we're getting that kind of, but I'm getting a lot of telephone calls about Main Street. Main Street, people want a lot of the trucks, at least some of the time, being, you know, not allowed on there. Like on Lynn Avenue, there's no large trucks may take a right-hand turn in there, right? Now, I know that in the next couple of months, or 3 months, probably, you're gonna see a lot of less traffic because it's winter time and you're gonna see all the activity around the aggregate plants and what have you shut down because there won't be so much work. So, I mean, this might be a good time to get things in order or find out where it is. Or maybe it's a bad time because the traffic is not gonna be what it has been or will be again in the springtime.
Well, I will say that the 2017 traffic study was done by an independent party in this particular slide, but it was done last December, or a year ago this time. The ones that I did for 2018 just happened in the September timeframe.
Is Main Street on there?
No, it isn't. But I know somebody who lives on Main Street. And
well, I've had about 4 different people.
That's me, by the way. I live on
I know you do. I know you do. But I'm not talking about so far up there, but I'm sure if they're going up there, I don't, like I mentioned to you one time, I can understand them going up Groton because they're coming down Swain Road, right? And there is a problem with Swain Road and Main Street, and the DPW is aware of it, and it's a big undertaking because of the elevations of 2 roads. And they've addressed it, and they know that it has to be fixed, but it's a big project, and it's going to be time consuming.
And they've been hampered this year. We've talked about it, and I've talked to Highway about it, and due to the excessive amount of rain and the short window they had to complete their paving this year,
you get in the middle of it, and then you get the kind of weather we got, then we could have been in some real trouble with, not being able to finish the project.
But to address one of the points you also made is that NIMCOG has a seasonal factor that it uses oftentimes to adjust for summer vacation versus wintertime. But I agree that there's a difference in the time of year when certain trucks would be running construction vehicles. So I've tried to schedule the traffic counts since I've been here, between May and September, so that we're catching seasonal traffic, buses as well as construction vehicles, to give a clear indication of what's going across our roadways.
And I guess it would be kind of tough to cut the traffic down on certain roads because you'd only be forcing them either into the square or into Scotty Hollow, Kelshel Drive type of thing. So, I mean, and you've already got a report from the Department of Transportation that we can't shut down Ledge Road. But we are working on moving that pole on Ledge Road so that perhaps coming out of Ledge Road or going in, they can go north. Is that instead of coming?
You're hitting every one of my slides before I get there. So.
I know, right? It's like you're psychic. Oh, you've seen this presentation
No, I mean,
before.
well, only because I've had a lot of calls, and Mike and I have had a lot of discussions about this.
Well, that's why I want to get it all in so you can comment.
I want the people to know that we've been trying to get this thing resolved up there, and it's not easy because you're dealing with a lot of regulations and then percentages. We had the same problem on Golden Cove Road. We've had the same problem a lot of places, and I can understand, people being annoyed by trucks, and nobody wants to.
Absolutely.
Like you put together a lot of slides.
Yes. What would you like me to speed through them, or?
Well, no, I'd like you to go through them.
Okay.
But try to make them in simple terms because, for you deal with them all the time.
Yep.
But for anyone else, they're
All right, we'll be brief. I wish the clicker was working, we could slide through them quicker, but if you would, Mr. Manager.
That's the trend, so you don't.
Yep, just the trend lines. And again, this is just showing the trend, what's happened in the last few years since 2006. The trend, it's just been increasing year over year on Route 40. And as Selectman Dixon indicated, I live on Main Street. We're seeing more and more of the 6-wheel dump trucks and now the 18-wheel dump trucks. And I do believe part of that has been some of the construction on Route 40 on the Westford side at Oak Hill. They're putting in the traffic light. And I'm starting to see more traffic in the morning coming from the Westford area up Main Street. And I know some of the residents at the end by Groton Road are seeing it as well.
We're putting sidewalks all the way up Route 40 on the Westford side too.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that was the reason, because it doesn't make sense that they're going up there. There's no way to go. I mean, they're going up Groton Road. They're going to be going to the highway.
Yep.
I don't understand where they'd be going up Main Street, but that's.
So they've gone up dramatically.
Yes. And so this, just for comparison to the next slide, this is 2015, just to give you an idea of the volume and the percentages. And the percentage of trucks in 2015 at the Westford line was 7%. At Route 3, east of Route 3, it was 4.5% roughly, and then 3% of the traffic going into the square was trucks. If you go down to 2018, as you noted, we have higher totals in a 24-hour period. And when I ran the numbers there, we have now 10.7% trucks now coming across the Westford line. And we've had a slight decrease on the east side. But what has happened this year, they have a new traffic counting device at NIMCOG for 2018, which it's put a multitude of vehicles into an other classification. And I spoke to Justin Howard the other day and asked him what I could explain to the board what other would mean. And he said it's clearly not a passenger vehicle. It's not a motorcycle, sedan, or pickup truck. It just can't be placed in one of the standard categories. However, in all likelihood, he said they are large trucks. So if we add the 2.7% in the first column, which is at the town line, you're seeing almost 14% of the vehicles coming in from Westford are heavy trucks. And that is up almost double from 2015, if you would. I did some second sets of traffic counts over in the Ledge Road, Dunstable Road, and Swain Road area. I started doing this when we got some complaints over off of Mission Road almost 2 years ago. The numbers on Mission Road have dwindled down from what they were 2 years ago, and I believe that was in large part to a construction project right over the Tingsboro line on Warden Ave. They were excavating a hill over there, and there was a significant number of trucks. But they've stopped on Mission Road, but we're still seeing a large number that has been increasing over the last 18 months, especially coming out of Ledge Road, if you would. So this is just a simple graph to show you. These are actually 72-hour samples that in May in 2017, and the yellow was passenger vehicles on Ledge Road. It was almost a 2-to-1 ratio of passenger vehicles to heavy trucks. In September of last year, it was still edging out about 55-45 passenger vehicles, and now you will see that 49% of the traffic on Ledge Road is trucks. And when you add in that other factor, it's well over, it's almost 61% when you add that other category, although we can't include it. They've said that really gives you an idea that the truck traffic has increased, more than doubled up in the Ledge Road area. Dunstable Road, we have approximately 13% when you factor in the other. So we now have 13% of the vehicles coming down Dunstable Road are trucks. And lastly, the Swain Road.
Over what period of time?
These are all 72-hour samples now. That's how they run. The older samples by NIMCOG were 72 hours. The new machine was running almost a week. So what I spoke to Justin Howard. We agreed to take a midweek 72-hour sample so that we're consistent with what was being done in the past. So we take a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in the middle of the week, and we did that with the 2018 sample, so we would have similar numbers to compare to. You will see in the number of passenger vehicles has has slowed down on Swain Road, but the percentage of trucks has continued to stay relatively proportionate, and it's well over 6.5% of the trucks over Swain Road of the daily traffic. And you had asked, Mr. Chairman, about the truck classifications. As I indicated, they have 15 classes. One of them is for other, but these are the 13 that the Federal Highway Authority uses. You can see Class 1's motorcycles, 2 is passenger, 3 is pickup, 4 is buses, and then 5 through 13 are the variety of different trucks that we see. And what we're starting to see is some of these larger dump trucks that are up in classes 10, 11, 12, and 13. I haven't seen a double, but we've had a couple come through registering as that. So if you would, Mr. Manager. So just to give you an idea of the classification breakdown, what they're seeing on Ledge Road, the first 2 or 3 columns there are passenger vehicles, and then the rest of them are the variety of different trucks. What you used to see was 3-axle trucks in 2017 in the red. This isn't working either. But what you're starting to see is larger type of dump trucks, 5-axle vehicles. Those are going to be the 18-wheel dump trucks. We're getting more of those, and then we have this new category of other. So as I indicated, we've had a huge increase in the number of trucks that are showing up on Ledge Road. And this coincides with the sale of the LeMaisure quarry at the end of Ledge Road back in March of 2017 when Newport Materials bought it. Just a sample of what's coming over Dunstable Road. Again, it's primarily passenger cars, but you are starting to see an increase in 2 and 3 axle trucks, but not as much as you see on Ledge Road. And there's one more slide, Mr. Manager, on this. This is a 72-hour sample of the classification on Swain Road. Again, it's primarily passenger, but you're starting to see the blue jumping up for 2018 in the larger trucks. We're seeing the 3, 4, 5-axle vehicles is there as well. So we often get asked what we can do about this, and this comes up to the conversation that Selectman Dixon and I have been having offline, as well as some of the residents. We've both been talking to the same folks, and people have asked about truck exclusions. So this language here comes from the Manual and Uniform Traffic Control Devices. This is a federal document which is adopted by the states, and there are some amendments in the Massachusetts Traffic Control Device Manual, and these are part of them, and this is the criteria for having a heavy truck exclusion. So one of the requirements to have a truck exclusion in a municipality is that you have to have a viable alternative route. So if we want to block traffic, and Selectman Dixon had mentioned Lynn Ave. Lynn Ave lies wholly within the town of Chelmsford. It begins and ends in Chelmsford, and it's not on a state highway, so we have to show that the alternative route would be to go down to the Triangle Store and turn around and go on Main Street. That way you could get around Lynn Ave without bringing the trucks through there. So that's one part of the test. You have to have an alternative route if we're going to put in a truck exclusion. But you will note at the bottom it says, numbered routes are ineligible for heavy commercial vehicle exclusions by the DOT. So that means we cannot exclude traffic on Route 40 because it's a state numbered route. So we can't do anything about that. So to try and alleviate some of the trucks in that area, we would be looking to see if we could do something on, let's say, Swain Road. Swain Road, number 1, lies wholly within the community, but it doesn't lie partially on a state highway, we would have to have the permission of an adjacent community. So if we're going to come up with an alternative route, we have to find a way to reroute the traffic without compromising a different neighborhood in town or impacting Vinyl Square.
Vinyl Square would get
inundated. So some of the other requirements that one would need, we have to show that we're getting heavy commercial vehicles, usually in the range of 5 to 8%. Clearly, we're going to be able to show that in those areas, but again, part of the problem is those major routes servicing Ledge Road, Swain Road, and Dunstable Road all originate and go through another town, or they are a major numbered route such as Groton Road, which is Route 40. The condition of the road is not really anything that we would be concerned about. Our roads up there are built to high standards. It's not going to be a problem. But the bottom letter C is an issue that comes up from time to time, is certain instances where the land is primarily residential in nature and the municipalities requested an exclusion during certain hours. And we're starting to see in these traffic counts that these trucks are running earlier and earlier. I'm getting calls that they're starting at 5:30. I'm seeing them on the truck counts at 6 o'clock coming through the down Ledge Road and on Dunstable Road. So we have these trucks going through our neighborhoods at an earlier time than they have in the past.
I guess.
To Selectman Dixon's point earlier, this is the existing route for the majority of the trucks. Rather than, unless they're coming from the north, traveling south, the majority of trucks that are coming up and that I see going through the area are coming up Route 3. They're either coming across Route 40 or they get off at the Route 3 interchange at exit 33. Right here. So the majority of trucks enter that way, then they come across to Swain Road. Then they're heading up Dunstable Road to Ledge Road under Route 3 up into Westford. So if we were to create a truck exclusion for Swain Road, if you would, Mr. Manager, the only viable alternatives to direct traffic to Ledge Road would to be either go from Route 40 down into Vinyl Square and come back up Dunstable Road. And the corner at Vinyl Square would not be an easy turn for those trucks. Or we would have to ship them up Route 3 and get off at exit 34. They'd have to come down through Westford and portions of Tingsboro to cross Dunstable Road. These routes, I think, are going to be difficult to persuade DOT to let us use. We would either have to get permission from the towns of Westford and Tingsboro, as I understand it, to proceed with the exit 34, or we would have to consider sending trucks through Vinyl Square.
There's a lot of trucks up there now, the rubbish disposals and things like that.
Yes.
But there's not much residential on that road at all.
No. What I wanted to point out on the next slide.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Okay, I thought you were going, okay.
NIMCOG publishes a traffic volume report every year. And last year, when they did the studies for me, they looked at their samples and noted that of the top 3 roads in their area that they take their samples throughout the Merrimack Valley, Ledge Road had the second and third highest percentage of truck traffic in the region. And I think when they publish it this year, based on the numbers that I've gone over with Dave Tilton and Justin Howard, Ledge Road is going to have the number 1 and 2 highest counts for the both ends of Ledge Road. So we now have the greatest, in my opinion, commercial truck density on any single residential road, and that's Ledge Road. So the question, what we will do going forward, if you would, Mr. Manager, is look at what we can do to alleviate the problems on Swain Road and Ledge Road. And this is one of the things that we'll have to look at regardless of whether we can get a truck exclusion. It's something that Selectman Dixon talked to me about, and I know he's working on it, is what we can do at the end of Ledge Road. I have family on Ledge Road, and I travel it quite frequently, and I really didn't catch on to this till Selectman Dixon and I were talking, but the road isn't a straight T. It curves in at the end, and it creates a problem. It's going to be very hard for folks at home to see it, but there is a telephone pole right at the edge of the road, right where this shadow is, and it carries all the electrical lines that run up and down Ledge Road. So for us to try and persuade, either through DOT or working with some of the businesses up Ledge Road, to have their trucks start utilizing the left turn going up to Dunstable to exit 34, we would need to make some improvements to the end of the Ledge Road, which would include involving National Grid and the utilities to get that pole moved. Because right now, I've spoke to some of the homeowners and others, the trucks that are trying to make that turn are driving across the lawn on the other side of the street. And since this Google Earth slide was taken, 2 houses have been built right on the corner on the south side of this photograph. So we would have a very difficult time, given where these houses are located closer to the road, to try and take some of the land to widen the road to allow for the banking of these trucks. So before we can move forward and try and do anything substantial or significant to help folks up there, we're going to have to start working with DOT, and I was going to ask the board their thoughts on whether or not they would allow me to start pursuing a preliminary traffic exclusion on Swain Road. Now, granted, there's going to be some difficulties, but also we're going to have to look at this corner here, as Selectman Dixon said. So it'll take time, and we may have some hurdles with regard to Swain Road, but I do think we should start the process of working with DOT, at least apply for some type of exclusion, whether it be for hours or for a truck exclusion if possible, if we can work them coming in from Dunstable Road. But again, we're going to have to work on that. We've also received complaints about jake braking. If those of you aren't familiar with that, that's when the trucks use their engines to downshift to brake. That they're braking at the intersection of Dunstable and Swain Road. So I've involved town council in some of these discussions, and I've talked to him about the idea of whether or not we could draft a bylaw to prevent jake braking in the town in the residential sections. So I gave him some of my notes last week, and he's going to look at that, and I'll come back to the board with that. But I leave it up to you, Mr. Chairman, as to what direction you'd like to have me go off on. But I would, having fair amount of family, again, that's another angle, is the street view of Ledge Road.
Is that the pole?
That is the pole, and that's the angle that you cut into Ledge Road. A lot of people think it's a T, it's more of a Y.
If you were to eliminate that, is that just going to create the problem somewhere else along there?
Well, the next street up on the left is Stone Hill, but there aren't any more real residential neighborhoods in Chelmsford. You quickly cross portions, a small portion of Tingsboro, and then you get into Westford, and there's marsh on one side, and there's some commercial properties, and then you get up towards the intersection near the Route 3 interchange for 34, and there's a lot of commercial property on the Westford end. So if we started putting more trucks heading north on Dunstable Road as opposed to south, I think there would be a minimal impact on any of our residents or any of the Westford residents. There might be a slight inconvenience for the trucks, but if you
it's a shot. I think it's a shot around.
Yeah, if you can
move the pole. Is that what you were talking? You were talking about the pole, not
Yeah.
the. So if you took the pole out of there and moved it 30 feet, say, into the
trees,
back into the trees.
Who owns that corner piece of property?
There is a private residence there. We haven't approached them or anything yet, or I haven't. I don't know if.
Well, there's always an easement in the corners anyway. There's a 25-foot easement at all corners, I believe. Is that correct, Paul?
It would depend on the county layout. That's the problem. I'd have to see the actual layout of where the roadway is compared to the paved surface.
You know, that's Chelmsford though, right? I mean, that's Chelmsford.
Is there a home on that corner piece farther back up?
Farther back in the trees, yes.
How far back?
Way back.
50 to 100 yards back.
Quite a ways. Is it possible that a road could be cut to Dunstable?
I don't know if you could cut it, but you could significantly widen that or flare out the end of Ledge Road so it would make it easier for a truck to take that left.
It was widen the corner.
Is the cheapest way to get rid of the pole?
Yes.
Provided everyone is in agreement.
Right. But I think we would only want to entertain that if it was a viable option. But I do believe, regardless of whether we had a truck exclusion, if we were to open that up, it would make it more appealing to some of the vehicles to take the left-hand turn, especially ones that had to come south on Route 3 to exit to the Route 40 exit and then come back.
Well, if you were coming forward on the right-hand side down Dunstable Road, that's Dunstable Road there, can you make that, even if you took the pole out and wind it, can you make that turn?
If we go back a slide.
Sure.
I think if you were to smooth that off, you can see part of the house is back in here, but if you would flare that out, as Dixon said, They could probably make that 30.
But would that require taking some land?
Depends where the right-of-way is compared to the paved surface. The right-of-way, as George was noting, is larger than the paved surface. So it depends that we'd have to have a survey of where the right-of-way is versus the paved surface. The other way to do it would be to bow out the other side. You know, there's a lot of space on the other side of the road. You could, you know,
So
push
really,
it out and around.
It really requires
It requires a survey. Requires a survey to be done to know where the layout is of the roadway, and then in traffic engineering.
My feeling is that we should expedite the investigation and come back with some better data in terms of what our options are. And it should be done quickly because these people are suffering up there.
Well, now's the time to do it. You can't do the work over the winter anyway.
Okay. So I will look into the Route 4 issue. I'll start exploring some counts on Main Street. I'll work with our engineers and town council about our options at that corner, and also, if with your permission, I will start talking with DOT about what we need to do to put in an application for truck exclusion, just to see what they would suggest for an alternative or a viable route for Swain Road.
So will you need a vote of the board as a whole?
You got a sense of the board is fine. Yeah, I think you're okay.
Everyone agree that that's the route we should take?
We definitely need more information, yes.
Yeah, we need more information. But
So proceed quickly.
Yes, sir.
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if there are any other questions before?
Possible ask a question. I've been in that business for 30 years, okay? You didn't mention when you have that cord across, you check the weight. The reason I tell you that, I know Newport Materials, I believe they're allowed 200 trucks a day going in.
That's only out of Westford.
That's for the asphalt plant.
That's only out of Westford.
Which isn't even open yet.
Well, they own this place now, right? They own
Yes, but it has nothing to do with it. That is a Westford law. That's an agreement they made with the town of Westford.
But I'm
It
saying,
has nothing to do with the
Judge, the
Chelmsford.
weight of these trucks, when I look at them, they're over 110, 120 pounds, okay? If you look at you can tell by the inflation of the tire, how much weight is on that vehicle, okay? And I see them up there, and they're all over that thing. The state police, when I used to work with them, they have a weight division that they used to have on Route 3 when we had that rest area. They would pull them in and weigh them, and you ever went by there years ago, all the lumber would be off. They'd be over the weight, and they'd make them up. So we can solve a lot of the problems if the state police still has that thing with the, weight's gonna kill your roads, okay? And I understand that they purchased this property, is that correct? Newport Materials?
Yes, that's my understanding.
So did they tell you how many vehicles are gonna be going in there?
No, but that's what we've been tracking.
There's
and
three
there's been
different
a
companies in there.
So
It's
Mike,
not
can
just
you
Newport,
investigate
but
weight
there are three
as
different
it
companies.
impacts this whole
Yes.
situation? And when Newport gets going with their asphalt plant, is that gonna change? Are they putting in another
Their
road?
aggregate is
or-
gonna be going into the mix, into their own mix as
Or
opposed
is
to
it just gonna use the
selling it
same route,
Well,
basically?
my understanding is they purchased, as Selectman Dixon was indicating, they bought the quarry because they're gonna use a lot of the stone and materials that they get out of there to make the asphalt. They need the aggregate. There are two other companies up there, and a lot of the trucks are going up, to all three of these locations. Newport is selling aggregate, as I understand, and then there are two other, Selectman Dixon, you might, it's Fletcher's, and then I can't think of the last one.
Yeah.
So none of
It's
them
the one
are-
the town does all the business with. I
So
forget
the
name.
business is-
I forget.
Graves.
So the aggregate business is good, and it's not in Chelmsford.
Correct. All of these businesses are in Westford, and they're only accessible by a ledge road.
Economic
But
development.
when they open up their plant.
Well, when you pick it, that's a cheap shot, Glenn. When you go in for rocks, you go where they are. You don't
You can't
build a
move
plant in,
rocks.
yeah.
When they open their plant, they're
You
gonna
gotta
be
dig 'em
needing
from where
that,
they
they're gonna
are.
be using that material mostly for their own.
Well, the only question is
product.
ultimately, long-term, when they open the plant, are they still using the same driving path to get the aggregate to the plant? Or are they going to use some internal road that they're going to build?
So pursuant to the settlement agreement that Newport and Westford reached as a result of their lawsuit, as Mr. Flynn indicated, there's a limitation or a prohibition on more than 200 trucks coming in the front end of Newport Materials on Route 40. But the settlement agreement said there's no limitation on Ledge Road, how many trucks they're bringing up through there. There is supposed to be a monitoring plan in place, and I've seen some of the counts. Westford is using cameras and other devices to track the number of vehicles that are going on the internal roads, and the cameras are supposed to ensure that no asphalt goes out the back end, and that was in the settlement agreement as well. So we're going to have to rely on Westford in part to ensure that no asphalt comes out the back end. That's not part of the agreement. It's supposed to only go out the front.
I don't think they could get it out the back
Right,
end
yeah,
because of the hole, because of the quarry holes in the road.
So in theory, more aggregate is coming out and the traffic is going to increase in Chelmsford?
Possibly on Ledge Road, correct.
All right.
Why can't we have the restriction like Westford has? Number of vehicles.
But that was part of a lawsuit.
It was part of an $8 million settlement.
I realize
So-
that. I know the settlement, but I'm saying, we're gonna have so many trucks on that road.
No, you're not, but
Well, I have involved town council. We're exploring all of our options, and I can
All right,
report back at a
Mike,
later
if
date.
you could, just do it as quickly as you can and come back and give us more data.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have annual license renewals.
Paul, do we have to do anything on this?
Yeah, you have to vote to, the start of the calendar year is also the start of the annual licensing year for licenses for common victualers, which are basically food establishments that have seating, and liquor licenses and club licenses and so forth. Christina Bruce in our office has been working diligently over the past several weeks to initiate and complete the license renewal process. In your packets is the list of license renewals.
Do we approve the list by?
You can approve the list.
By
yes.
topic or
yeah,
by?
Yeah, in the past, the board's done it different ways. As Pat knows, you could present the list as presented. I've seen the board read the entire list with exemptions. I think you can quite simply just approve the list of license renewals as presented.
Want to do all of them? Do you want to do them by alcohol, common vic? Do you want?
Do it all.
All right, so I'll make a motion to approve the total list of licenses as given.
presented for renewals.
For renewals, as given.
That's both alcohol and
Well,
auto
that's why-
dealer.
Victor club
That's why I
licenses
asked,
and
wanted me to
so forth.
specify. Right.
Auto dealers and so forth, as
Yep,
presented.
it's auto dealers, common, particular, and alcohol.
Have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
5-0. Town manager reports.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple quick items this evening. I'll be real brief, recognize we've been here a couple hours or so. I just want to report back to the board on the Mass Works infrastructure program. We did receive a letter since our last meeting on the 27th of November. The town did not receive funding for the Mass Works submittal regarding the sidewalk and infrastructure improvements across from Apollo Drive at Scientia for that permitted project. As noted in the response letter from the state, they had 107 applications requesting over $207 million in funding, and obviously they evaluated and funded other projects. And so obviously we will look to continue that phase at a future funding round. So I just wanted to report.
How much did we request?
I think it was $664,000 was the request there. It had to do with the sidewalk installation and so forth, so.
Crosswalk and,
Yep,
yeah.
exactly. The next one is the reminder of the board and also notification of the community. Next Monday evening at 7 p.m. at the school administrative offices on North Road, there'll be a joint meeting of the Board of Selectmen, the Finance Committee, and the School Committee for a discussion regarding the upcoming budget process for fiscal year 2020. The discussion will include a presentation from the town accountant, Darlene Lucia. She'll provide a budget report to date on the current fiscal year. By that point, she'll have the November revenue closeout in terms of where we stand to date in terms of revenues and expenditures. Last Friday morning, the Capital Planning Committee completed its capital plan recommendations for 2020 at the spring annual town meeting. John Souza will present that overview. I will then present an overview of the town's financial budgetary history, uses of funds, and then a projection of available revenue and upcoming expenditures as we guide the process. And I also have some action items sort of at the end of the process in terms of where we can go. I think tonight's discussion sort of, provides some insight in terms of concerns and that we're mindful of in terms of expenditure levels of the town. I think we also have seen some data in terms of the taxation situation in Chelmsford compared to other towns and spending levels. You will see 10-year histories, 5-year histories, and so forth. And I think there's an interesting story there, and I think part of the story that gets missed is we anguish in this community. But one of the big problems we've had over the last generation is we're sort of being abandoned by our federal and certainly state partnerships in terms of the operations that run the community, which falls an increasingly heavily burden on the property tax. So anyway, we'll have that discussion next Monday evening, the 10th. And then per the town's bylaw, the last Monday in January, at your second meeting in January, I will then present my proposed fiscal year 2020 operating and capital budgets. And that, as you know, at that point, Finance Committee will begin its hearings to get to the April town meeting. So we're sort of back, we sort of closed fall town meeting. You've completed the actions for fiscal 19 tonight, and then we start next Monday night sort of with 20, and we'll go from there. So that's, and then the last thing I have for you has to do with, we received late this afternoon a resignation from Ed Rue of the Planning Board, effective tomorrow. I personally want to thank Ed for his service to the town. He served, I think, a decade on the planning board. Prior to that, he was on the personnel board and other capacities. He's just not able to do the commitment any further. So what happens in that instance, as you may recall, we did recently with the Board of Health, that's an elected vacancy, so you'd have to have a joint meeting with the remaining members of the planning board and the Board of Selectmen to appoint someone to fill the vacant position by Mr. Rue's resignation. In my discussions with Evan Belansky earlier this evening, the Community Development Director, he's going to discuss this with the planning board at their meeting next week, next Wednesday evening. But I think the expectation is rather than let the position sit vacant for 3 months, January, February, and March, until the April 2nd town election, we probably would ask to fill that position, even if it, perhaps with the alternate or someone else, because the challenge is, and we saw this last Wednesday night in this room with the planning board, is when the alternate member votes, the alternate member can only vote on special permit applications. And so therefore, when there are other aspects such as subdivision approval and so forth, it then leaves the applicant with one fewer voting members. And given the workload and nature of the project, it's probably helpful to have a full board. So I anticipate I'll bring this back to you in 2 weeks. And then what we would do is we advertise the position, we post it, the clerk's office, and then we'll post it online and so forth, and then we would have that joint meeting at your January 7th meeting.
Was Ed's position open?
Yes, his was open. He was open in April anyway. So he's stepping down 3 months early or 4 months early. So yeah, that would be open anyway. So you'll have 2 positions open on the planning board. Henry Parlay's position is also open, and then the alternate position is open.
Has he resigned already? You mean, or
no? His term is up. His term is up. So you'd have Ed and Henry's position are up, and then the alternate position is up as well because that was an unexpired appointment as well. Remember when the person who held the alternate, Tim Shannon, got elected to the full position, and then you put Hank Hool into that position. He serves until the April election. So you'll have the 2 full seats and 1 alternate seat on the ballot come April. And then related to that is the Housing Authority vacancy exists. I heard from David Hedison today that there has been some interest in that position. The challenge there is I'm waiting to hear back from him from how the Housing Authority wishes to go, because in that instance, if you met at your meeting in January, where the Housing Authority only meets once per month, you would only really be appointing somebody for two meetings, the February and March meeting. And so I guess we'll wait to hear back from them in terms of their thoughts on whether to fill that.
Jumpstart theoretically, someone who was going to run for the position.
Right, and that's a question of, do you want to make that incumbent jumpstart? It's kind of like when the Masters appointed, a vacancy in the Senate. So it's your choice, right?
But
so that's your choice.
It's also, it's just when
And
The
then
goal
you
is
make
to
them
get
an
more
incumbent.
people in, so if you have a person appointed for
Yeah.
a few meetings,
Yeah.
they can decide,
I
okay,
wanna
yes,
do
I
this?
really do want to run,
Right.
or, you know what, this is not
The,
gonna
the only challenge is on that position where they only meet once a month and the
Yeah.
deadline to submit nomination papers is
It's
the
a learning
beginning of
curve
February.
and
You
the-
got like one meeting to experience whether you want to be a member of the
Also puts
committee.
them down as an incumbent, which a lot of people
Right.
vote for in
So-
elections.
So anyway, I will get back to you, but wanted to make you and the community aware that we now have an opening on the planning board, and we're waiting on the housing authority.
I have one question on your
Yeah.
first topic.
Yeah.
As I remember, when we were doing the charter review,
Mhm.
there was a lot of discussion about, there was a clause in there that I think it referred to the Board of Selectmen would be working with the school department on their budget. And the discussion followed that, well, there is a tri-board meeting in January, and that would serve as that requirement. I don't know if you remember that discussion. But anyone else? George, you remember that?
I remember it, yeah.
And obviously the chairman, if he was still here, I mean, he would bring it up. So is it possible they can have some general discussion about their intentions for budget?
School committee?
Yeah.
What I've asked the superintendent a few weeks back, and I'm awaiting it, is if he could give me the numbers for the cost drivers. In other words, if they did nothing, their costs would increase because you'd have increased costs of people who were employed by the system getting another year of seniority, which is the steps aspect. So I've asked for that number. They also have to have a number which they'll reserve in their budget for collective bargaining. So you'll have that number. And then I'd also ask them of other cost drivers, such as, is there an increase in their transportation contract? Is there an increase in, special ed contract? In other words, what are their cost drivers if all other things were constant? And so I expect to have that information the next few days, which I'll then incorporate into my report for next Monday evening. Same way on the town side, we're doing the same thing. I met with John Souza, our finance director, and Darlene Lucy, our town accountant. We know the number for Middlesex, the over $500,000 we're going to have to pay to Middlesex by doing nothing, just because of the unfunded liability. We have a number that we're estimating for health insurance, and similarly, we have the number that what will it cost us for the cost of living adjustment, as well as any step increases on the town side, because those contracts have to be bargained, so we need to hold that money. And then the same thing, I'm looking to see, well, what's our increase in our trash contract, and so forth. So what I'll have for you would be what are the cost drivers, and then on the other side, you'll see what is our levy capacity under 2.5. Obviously, the 2.5% number is a known number. That's a mathematical calculation. And we'll have an estimate on new commercial and residential property growth, and then you'll see that it's that a lot of the funds get consumed just on the fact of staying in business another year.
Will
but yes,
the
we'll have that
superintendent
information.
be talking about those items himself, or are you presenting them?
I'm doing a presentation. I don't know if he's intending to make a
Maybe
presentation.
you can check back with Sam.
I can.
As far as that discussion that the Board of Selectmen was supposed to have a dialogue concerning the budget.
Yeah.
If he made the presentation, that would, I think, serve that purpose. And the reason is that it then gives the ability to do some dialogue directly with the people who are originating the numbers.
Okay. Yeah, I'll check with Dr. Lang to see if he's intending to make a presentation next Monday evening.
And if my recollection is wrong, if they change some language that it wasn't required, then we can go to Plan B.
Okay.
That make sense?
Sure. Okay. I do have one appointment for you this evening. I'm seeking your confirmation of the appointment of Erin Drew for a position as an associate member of the Board of Appeals for a one-year term expiring June 30th, 2019.
Do you have a motion?
Yep, I'll make a motion to approve Erin Drew to the Board of Appeals associate member for one-year term.
Second.
All those, any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. 5-0.
Thank you.
We have some meeting minutes to approve, the BOS meetings from 9, 10, 18, which were very long. Anyone have any questions concerning them? We have a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the September 10th, 2018 meeting minutes.
second.
Any discussion at all? No? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 5-0. We have Selectmen Liaison Reports and Referrals. Pat, do you want to go first?
Okay, thank you. A few things. First of all, we have Army Specialist Tyler Evans, who has returned home from his deployment, and we welcome Tyler home. We're glad that he's home safely to be back with his family. So welcome home, Tyler. This Friday, December, what day is it? 8th?
7th, December 7th, the day
December
that will live in infamy.
There you go. The Historic Society is having their annual holiday reception from 6:30 to 8:30. One of the local garden clubs does the decoration inside the house on Byam Road, and it's always interesting. They do a wonderful job, and there's refreshments and people there to talk about the history of Chelmsford and the history of that.
What time is it?
6:30 to 8:30 on Friday, so everybody is welcome. And lastly, we lost last Friday a woman who was very much involved in the community, Jean McCaffrey, who served many terms on the Cemetery Commission, also was a library trustee, member of the Cultural Council, and I believe Council on Aging, served a couple terms. She really gave a lot to this community, and she will be missed. So,
Ken?
Sure. Just a couple liaison reports. Tree Committee, they're probably, I think, coming in front of us to discuss. They found the ash borer in the state of Massachusetts. I mean, in the town of Chelmsford. Yep. And so they're going to come before us to tell us exactly what that means and what we should be doing. I think in the next meeting.
17th. I spoke to Mr.
Okay.
There we go.
Yeah, Jim Martin. And then I don't know if you remember at I think it was the Springtown meeting. There was a warrant article to enforce restaurants to have large font menus. And I've been sitting with the Commissions on Disability, although it's not my committee. I've been going to their meetings, and they're making some pretty good headway in taking just a different approach of offering a kit to the businesses and explain the reasons why they want to be disability friendly. And I think they're making some great headway. I think it's going to be interesting when they finally come forward with that to show it to the town. And I applaud them for sort of taking a different approach instead of penalizing, trying to make the restaurants a partner with them. I want to thank everybody for the tree lighting Sunday night. That was they did a good job, and I think it was well attended. A lot of people with a lot of kids out there. And then I want to remind everybody that this Thursday night, the Wish Project is having their annual gala at the Radisson.
6 to 9.
Yep, 6 to 9. I was over there. They've got a lot of great auction items that they're going to be giving off. And Fred Marion helped me print a bunch of old black and white pictures, and some of them he owns the negatives too and have never been printed. And we took them over to Michael's and had them framed up nice. There's one of 1927, the Chelmsford Police busting up a still on Tatamock Road.
Remember that one, George?
Were you there, George?
Yeah. That was his still. So they're going to have some really neat pictures of Chelmsford that you're probably not going to see come to print again. So, get out there, buy your ticket, get your money, your bids in. That'll be kind of neat.
Representative Golden is the auctioneer.
Oh, yeah. And then just a couple shout-outs. My son tonight in Littleton was just offered, or he went in front of the selectmen and was approved to be a police officer in Littleton. I just got that text, so that's what I missed tonight. And then my second son was, my son who's a sophomore, was at the sports award and got an award at the sports banquet tonight. So the text I'm getting while I'm sitting here with you people.
Glad they took you up to their mother.
Yep. Thanks, George.
George?
All set.
Finley?
The Route 40 Committee has been working hard to gather information and is in that wrapping up stage. The next meeting is December 11th. That's a week from tomorrow at 7 p.m. in this room. And public input is welcome, and people are welcome to come and see how it's going and to participate in the discussion of the options around Route 40 and whether or not to rezone.
Okay. A couple of weeks ago, I was at a meeting of the Board of Health, which was supposed to be a meeting to let people talk about their issues on the chickens one way or another. Unfortunately, it was canceled when one of the members had to be somewhere else in 10 minutes, and they felt that it wasn't fair to have people talk and not have the full board there. They resumed it tonight. And although a lot of people make fun of the chicken issue, for a lot of people it is a very serious topic. Not only affects chickens, but other small animals. And I would urge people to watch the video of tonight's meeting and pay attention to it because it is a serious topic for a lot of people in town. Any press questions tonight? Nope. All right. Next regular meeting date is December 17th, 2018. Do we have a motion?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Thank you.